My name is Tom Kay. I'm going to be the chairman of the planning commission. And I really thank you for coming. I'm going to start by a couple things that we want to do. Tonight we have only one item on the agenda, and that's the Proc Investments LLC, which is consider a limited use permit for an event venue, including 10 rentable rooms plus up to 10 RV spaces located south and east of Testman Road in Delta County, Colorado. I'll start right off the bat to say, for the Procs and anybody else who's associated with that, thank you for your patience. We've had a number of delays, some we couldn't anticipate, some generated by the community, some generated by Mother Nature. In all of the cases, I mean, I don't know, every time we have you, it's snowing like crazy or blowing like hell. So we need you guys to repeatedly apply things when we're in a drought shortage. So it seems like we always fix it. Again, we are only addressing the Proc Investment LLC tonight. If you're here for anything else, you're more than welcome to listen, but we will have no public input on anything else. I just want to make that clear. So if people thought we're going to be able to speak or address other issues regarding planning or county commissioners or anything else, I won't hope it happens tonight. We will recognize the people on Zoom at the appropriate time. We'll ask you, this is only one person.
There are 5 people.
Oh, okay. We'll ask them to unmute and we'll address them specifically, whether they're for or against, and have them speak at the time. Let's see what else. I always forget the simple things. Cell phones. Please turn them off, mute them, break them, whatever you need to do to make them work. And with that, I think we'll do a simple introduction. We have some new members to the Planning Commission. I want to make sure everybody gets to know who everybody else is. And again, I'll start with myself. I'm Tom Kay. I'm District 3. Is that right? I don't know. From the Hotchkiss, North Fork area.
Jacob Gray, District 3, outside Pioneer.
Cindy Watson, District 2, Delta.
Wayne Bronis, District 2, Cedar Ridge.
Hardy Hutto, District 2, Service Creek. David Merrick, District 3, Paonia.
Todd Queen, I believe District 1, Delta.
Steve Schrock, District 1, Delta, Garnet Mesa.
Kate Darlington, District 3, Crawford.
Victoria Turner, I'm in District 2, Cedar Ridge.
Kate Kelly, planner for Delta County.
Brady Manning, planning technician for Delta County.
Everett Neal, Delta County Code Compliance.
I'm Carl Holm. I'm the planning director for Delta County.
Okay, so we are going to just do some official business here regarding our previous minutes. We have a sign-in sheet. People keep coming in. If you would like to speak, we certainly need you to sign in. If you don't, I don't think you need to, but if you're coming in late, it's up to you.
Do you want to sign in or I can bring it? Okay.
And we'll go through this at a later date, sir. To that, we would like to address our minutes from the previous meeting of February 8th. The recommendation is to approve the minutes as presented. If anybody has any questions or comments on the minutes, speak up. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I make that motion.
Thank you very much. Motion. We have a second. Thank you, Jacob. Any other discussion on it? All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you very much. All right, with that, we're going to move into the public hearing item PLN 22-066 Proc Investment LLC. It's a continuation. We're going to have a presentation by the planning department, and then we're going to ask the applicant to address any other issues that they think we may have missed. And then we're going to, I guess I will see what order we'll take it in. Either we're going to have the planning commission ask the applicant some questions, or we'll take some questions from people who are in the audience for and against. Kate, we'll start with you. Thank you.
All right, so this is PLN 22-066. This is Proc LUP. This is a limited use permit for a multi-purpose venue, including events, rentable rooms, and RV spaces. The property is located southeast of Testman Road in Delta. This parcel is a 76-acre parcel that is currently used for agricultural purposes and has been zoned as A35. This application is for a limited use permit, again for a multi-purpose venue. This type of application can be done administratively per the land use code. However, due to the intensification of the application, the director referred it to your commission to address noise and traffic specifically, as there is limited access for this parcel onto Testman Road. This is the vicinity map. The parcel is located to the southeast of Testman Road and is about 1.66 miles south of the city of Delta. Again, the parcel has been zoned as A35. As you can see from the zoning map, the property abuts a large area of A5, which consists mostly of smaller lot residential. There is a portion of A20 to the north with larger parcels, and then the rest of the surrounding areas are a majority of A35 with large parcels consisting of agriculture. This is the site plan that was submitted with the application. The proposal is to develop in the area of the property that does not consist of irrigated ag grounds. There will be a main 2-story building, a separate structure used for lodging, and then the RV spaces. This site plan does not show the separate structure or the RV spaces, as they were added to the proposal after the site plan was submitted. The blue, yellow, and pink lines illustrate the utility lines on the property, with the green being the proposed septic location. So the aerial there shows the area on the property that is not currently irrigated, which is their proposed development site. The business plan includes events being held on Saturdays and Sundays with an estimate of 35 events per year and up to 400 attendees, with the average event having 150 guests. Lodging would include 10 guest rooms, which would be in a separate structure than the main event building, with another area for up to 10 RV spaces. There will be 5 employees with hours of operations from 9 a.m. to 1:30 a.m.
That you read AM, right?
Yep, sorry about that. The average event duration is 4 to 6 hours, and the applicants are proposing that the remaining 70+ acres will remain in ag production. So these are some of the aspects of the design. The main building will consist of a gathering/seating area, commercial kitchen, and public restrooms on the first floor. The second floor will have a bride and groom suite with their own restrooms, and the rest will be open gathering area, open to the first floor gathering area. Parking as proposed will consist of 1 point of ingress and egress onto Testman Road. There will be 150+ parking spots. The traffic study lists 172, which includes employees and the wedding party specifically. There would also be 10 RV spaces. This shows the main roads that would be used for traffic to and from the venue. From Testman Road traveling east, traffic would travel along 1600 Road. And from Testman Road traveling northwesterly, traffic would travel along D Road. Sorry, you guys can't see that header on there. These are the traffic counts in the area along Testman Road and D Road. And these are from 2020 and 2021 as confirmed by county engineering. This is the chart as presented in the traffic study that was completed in December 2021. I'm sorry, 2022. This gives an overall project trip generation and timing of the event venue with the assumption of 2.5 people per vehicle. So this is broken out into assumed times of hours and guests departing from the event venue as the night goes on. The site will have domestic water supplied by Tri-County. Any requirements for the site, including backflow devices, will be monitored by Tri-County. Both the main building and the lodging facility will have restrooms with the rentable rooms, each having their own. The applicants will be required to work with environmental health to obtain septic permits for the proposal, including the RV spaces, and they will also need to work with environmental health for the commercial kitchen. Dust control includes placing crushed asphalt down on the road, and noise will be mitigated with the design of the buildings as the doors will be closed while music is played, and there is also state requirements in place that need to be followed. They will have fire evacuation plans posted in all rooms on site. Fire extinguishers will also be used. As a reminder, Delta County does not have fire codes in the unincorporated areas of the county. Staff consulted with the local fire department. They suggested that the applicants meet with Chuck Mathis, which is the City of Delta Fire Code official. I would like to point out that the traffic study that was in your packet states that staff met with the area fire chiefs to confirm fire department needs for emergency site access during the event. To our knowledge, this did not occur. There are also numerous fire hydrants located nearby, 8 of them within half of a mile, the closest being less than 1,000 feet. Oops, sorry about that, but you can see here. There are, all these red areas are the fire hydrants located within this area. Numerous neighbor comments have been received. The main concerns are traffic on Detesman Road and safety, noise, and fire mitigation. And with that, staff is recommending that your commission consider PLN 22-066 PROC as it complies with the LUC as a limited use permit for an event venue, including 10 rentable rooms plus up to 10 RV spaces. And we ask that your commission recommend conditions of approval. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Zach, we will give you the floor now for anything else you'd want to add or address specifically that you think, needs additional attention. And then I think I'm going to ask that the planning commission, address you with any questions, or staff if they have any questions when you're done. So you've got the floor and take whatever time you need.
Okay. So
Just do me a favor. When I ask you, when you speak, we just need you to state your name because it's on the record.
Yep.
And your address. Thank you.
All right, my name is Zach Brock, 72015 Kennecan Road, Montrose, Colorado, 81401. I guess just a quick background of who I am. I graduated from Montrose High School, grew up there, and then went to CSU, came back, and I've started a couple of little businesses in that area. I've got Kennecan Processing in Montrose, own a couple of pawn shops, one in Delta and 2 in the Montrose area. And then I've got a guide and outfitting business, and then Mesa Rentals. And so when we started Mesa Rentals in Delta, then that's when I met up with Brenda. And we were already renting stuff to wedding venues and renting a lot of equipment to them. And so it just maybe made sense to then try to open a venue ourselves. My parents as well have a wedding venue in Montrose. So I've been around that venue and around those types of things. And it just seems like there's a need for one in Delta. This is a really nice venue that we're looking at putting in. It's not something that's chintzy or cheap, but we'll put a lot of money and make sure it's really done right. And so I think really from there, I like having the openness of that piece of ground. It's almost 80 acres. And so there's a lot of ground around us, and a lot of it will be left in ag. We put a bunch of it into sunflowers this year, just because we want to leave it pretty and to make it neat for the neighbors as well. And we'll plan to continue to do that with just having those couple of buildings in the center of the property. So I think, that's kind of the gist of it. I think I'd let everybody ask questions and I can kind of answer from there. I think maybe be the best.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. So at this time, I'd like the planning commission members to address either Zach or the staff. If you have questions regarding the presentation and what you read, in your packet, and we'll start. Go ahead, Cindy, you may have a question.
So I have a question. Very familiar with these venues, familiar with Antler Ridge and a bunch of ones you've been organized with. Liquor license. Is that something that you will carry, or is that something that each person that comes, it sounds like you're going to have several events a year, maybe 35 or so. Are those individuals going to have to come to Delta County to obtain a liquor license, have it posted, or how are you going to do that?
It's something that we would like to just have in-house. So we would
Okay.
hold the liquor license and take care of that. I think that's simpler than trying to transfer that every
Okay.
time.
Okay, thank you. That was all my questions.
Okay, Lane?
With all the rental rooms and the RV spaces, what's your plan for septic?
It would be just a design septic system. The set up an engineer just like everybody else would.
So it is professional engineer.
Yes, oh yeah, of course.
Then one other, the ingress egress, looks like it's quite limited. Can you expand that a little bit?
Yeah, that'll be, I mean, wider than, it'll be plenty wide enough. I think that traffic study, it calls for 20 feet to make sure, or passing areas where if you had needed fire trucks or needed emergency vehicles to come in. But I think it's better for us just to leave that wide and to have plenty of room.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you.
David? Oh, I'm sorry, Hardy. I skipped the seat, sorry.
It's kind of early on, but as far as the hydrant deal, are you planning on putting a hydrant closer just because you got such an investment than what the hydrants are there?
Right now, there's not enough water line there to do it. So that's why we originally had all of our rooms in the same building. And so with my engineer or my architect, suggested that we take and put those and separate that so that the living quarters would be, or those rentable rooms would be outside of the facility. And then we just went through and put a kind of a few extra exits to make sure that there wasn't a problem getting out of the building. The building really doesn't cause a hazard to anybody else around us. It's not like in a subdivision where we have a problem or a threat to anybody else.
Yeah, I was just thinking, £5 that kind of money for safety and just might want some sort of a fire mitigation a little closer than in the subdivision, but something to look at. And then where's the other venue that you're involved in Montrose?
My folks have Antler Ridge is what it's called. It's on Kennecan.
Yeah. All righty, I'll probably have more questions later. Thank you.
Okay, Lane? No, sorry, David.
There's been some discussion and recommendation about a secondary emergency access, because you got one way in and one way out, right?
That's right.
And I don't see that you have the ability to do that at this time.
Or the secondary.
The
access.
secondary.
The secondary access originally was set up that we were going to speak with the incoming church that's coming next door to us and see if we could get an access that way. Both the guy that was going to do this, there's been some staff changes here. And so some of that has gotten switched up or changed a little bit, but that's something that we can go back and explore some more.
But you don't have that.
We don't, right now we have one access.
You mentioned the church is gonna be next door. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's to the, yeah. On where the good property is.
Lower right-hand side.
Oh, the rig, okay.
kind of do the arrow around?
I see.
Yep.
Where would you,
So putting an additional access on that north end somewhere. I haven't seen exactly what their layout was. That was originally brought up by
I
staff.
can show you where the
I was gonna say, we
thing
can show
is.
you.
It comes in right about here, and
Okay.
crosses over, comes back down. Then he's gonna have to cross the irrigation ditch there.
Yeah, that would be.
Where's he building on there? Can you show us approximately where we're talking about?
Right under the writing, kind of
Yep.
And then
Like right
center.
there.
about right there,
Yeah.
where your middle fingers.
I'm kind of worried about his entrance right here.
Okay, well,
Is it off-
sir, we'll give you a chance to speak when we get to that, okay? Thank you.
I've seen it.
so are you indicating that you will have, or you're sure that you're gonna have the secondary access?
No, I'm not sure of that at all. I will pursue that, but right now I think that what we're coming to the floor with is one access.
There was some discussion about a sprinkler system in that big building. That's not feasible, or? is it-
There's not the water currently.
There isn't enough water for that.
To do that, and speaking with my architect, the way it's set up now, that it's not a requirement. That would be something that we could, is more of a voluntary thing.
An additional fire hydrant, that's even a private one, is not feasible either because of the lack of water pressure.
They just don't have a big enough line.
The proposal includes 10 units, I guess, separate rooms, and then the RV spaces as well. Is it your intention to rent those units when you don't have an event there, or will they be closed down and only available during an event?
They're mainly for the event. We're not really in the hotel business just to rent them. Our intention is to have it available for the people when we're doing those events.
So you would agree or stipulate as part of this proposal that they would not be available?
I don't know that I would stipulate that,
Okay,
but that's our intention is to use it for those events.
and it is a condition of this permit that you have a commercial septic system, an engineered system, whatever that is required by health department.
Correct.
Will be compliant. I don't think I have anything else.
Todd?
My question is gonna be, I think, for staff. Can we verify that there has been communication with the Delta County Fire Protection District? I sit on the board for Delta County Fire Protection District 1, and to my knowledge, there has been no communication about this for that district to provide their input on fire needs.
I know that Angie had sent an email and then they had said to reach out to Chuck Mathis. That's the only communications that I am aware of.
So staff did not get anything specific from the district, and that's why, if I remember right, I think Angie had conversation with the Procs about looking at how to address fire conditions without having fire codes. And that's where they came up with the ingress, egress, and the fire extinguishers, if I remember correctly.
Because at our meetings, we have a section to cover specifically these proposals and have never had that. And speaking with fire chief, he knew nothing about it.
Okay.
So that's something I just would like to see us confirm and make sure that communication occurs.
Sure.
Steve?
Back to the entryway, welcome, Mr. Proctor. I think I knew Mom and Dad from way back when, the later days. You probably were tight when you were around. So if I understand the entry dilemma here, we actually thought we had a recommendation from the fire department for a minimum of 12 feet and preferably 20 feet. I thought I saw that in our report. Now I'm a little confused by that. They didn't make that. I don't know where that came from. And I don't know whether staff has a recommendation about the width of the entryway egress. 15 feet does not seem adequate.
No.
And I'm not sure 12 feet is adequate. I'm not sure about 20. But I know that with your traffic and emergency vehicles potentially, that entryway width is going to be a real issue, and we need to solve that somehow before we move this on, I think.
Sure.
And I thought I heard you say you were sort of in the solving arena, maybe through the other secondary route, but then I heard you say, no, that's not really done. So that would lead me to ask you, are you looking for other property around your ingress area, your access area, to purchase now to be able to have adequate?
We did expand where our entrance is. We expanded ours because we cut across a neighbor there that he's got like a flagpole, if you will, that comes into the corner. And his property is in the northwest part of my property. So I've got a 60-foot easement through his piece, so we can do a 20-foot easement onto the road there and have a 20-foot wide.
Can somebody point out with a laser pointer where you're talking about?
I think I see where he's talking about, but
Right on the corner where we meet Testman. There'll be a 20-foot access, a 20-foot road that will come through there.
so it'll be a combination of your property and an easement that you worked out with that property.
Correct.
So, I think we need some documentation for that easement.
I think that's been filed and it's been, I believe the staff has that.
So I did receive that today, this afternoon, and it has been recorded with the clerk's office.
Okay, and so that gives you 20 feet?
It's 60 feet on top of it's 60 feet.
It's a 60 feet on top of your 50.
It's 60 feet wide, the 60-foot easement. That's
Okay.
what that is. Yeah. So to run 20 foot, put a 20-foot road through there isn't an issue.
Okay, that helps. Not a real issue. Back to the issue of whether or not you are a wedding venue or a motel. And I just want to make sure that I understand it, because I think I heard you say, no, we want the ability to maybe rent RV spaces and hotel rooms out, but we don't plan to do that. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're really, our intent really is to do events, whether it's a wedding or whether it's a funeral. We want to, that's how we're set up to do that, is to have that event. To build an 8,000 square foot building and then just rent, and then just have a room next door and just rent the rooms, that's not the intent. The intent is to utilize the big building.
Okay. If I understood your proposal, most of the event activities will be indoors.
There'll be indoor, outdoor, using patio space and some green, some lawn space around that, mainly during daylight hours. And then primarily indoor after that.
Well, that's kind of where the rub comes from for your neighbors.
Sure.
Obviously outdoor events, music, wafting in the neighborhood, and all of that. And if we were to consider limiting you to only indoor use, would that be a problem?
It would. A lot of people want to have an outdoor wedding. And I don't think that we have to have blaring music until 2 o'clock in the morning. But I think that we need to be able to utilize that outdoor space. And that's the whole point, having it in the country and having it outside, is to be able to have that and to be able to enjoy that and the views. And to, if we're gonna do that, then just put in a big building right in town and steel building and decorate the inside of it. I think that takes away from it.
Yeah, you still have neighbors, and you still have a nuisance factor with respect to noise.
Sure.
Something that we have to take into consideration. Limitation of hours. I saw that one of your proposals was to have events at 1:30 a.m. I think it was 1:30 p.m. here, but it's 1:30 a.m. I think in your proposal.
And I think we've got to set it at a certain time that the doors would close and any music would be inside. It wouldn't be outside of the venue past a certain time.
But it's conceivable that a wedding event indoors, let's say, would go to 1:30 and people would be exiting the property after 1:30 a.m.
That's correct.
Likely taking advantage of your liquor license. And all of that,
You
right?
can draw a lot of conclusions from a lot of different things.
Well, I think that's a reasonable conclusion. Something that we have to consider. Let me just think of one more here. Hold on, I'm sorry. I should have memorized this, but I didn't. I have notes. And I saw you in your report of your traffic engineer that he didn't think there was any conflict with local traffic in your use of that property. And I sort of want to hear from the neighbors about that too, but I have concerns about that. I mean, if you have a release after an event, once a couple says, I do, everybody has a drink or so, and then they go home. It could be a pretty massive release all of a sudden of traffic into what's pretty much a residential area.
I think what was pointed out by the traffic engineer is that in events like we're planning on handling or having, is you don't have a release. I don't know anybody that they say I do, and half the crowd picks up and leaves. Right? So I think that it's a whole dynamic of people that are there from, you know, older to younger to whatever. And I think that stages how those people tend to leave an event like that. And that's what he was saying in his report, is that, you know, unlike, you know, where the church is going to be just down the street, when they say, okay, we're done, everybody leaves. When you do a wedding, you have this real staggered release. Some people leave in the first couple hours, some people stay until after dinner, some people leave at the very end of the night. And so with what his findings and what he's showing is that he doesn't think that that's a large impact because of that slow release.
Okay. Well, we'll have to decide whether we agree with him on this. The numbers he used, I would just point out to my colleagues here, were the traffic numbers that are apparently 2021, 2022, but those were 24-hour period traffic numbers. And when you really think about it, you know, the heavy use of that is going to be with probably an 8-hour period. So the way he does his math and traffic coming out, the impact of traffic there is not quite synced up in my mind. I'll pass and talk to us. Thank you.
Katie?
Did we have any comment from Road and Bridge about access point and safety concerns regarding that corner?
There was comment, I don't remember exactly what their comments were. I mean, the comments from county engineering, they pretty much said that the traffic study looked good to them. They would like a yield or stop sign maybe be required coming out of the access. I think that was the extent of comments, except for having an emergency access coming out on the 1600 road if they could get an easement through the good property.
And then in terms of state noise regulation, a lot of those regulations in my recollection are kind of like decibel levels that commoners don't necessarily understand or, you know, monitor on a regular basis. How does that work? If there's a complaint, does someone from the state come out with a little device during an event and test that, or like how does that get implemented or enforced in like practicality?
Noise would be enforced through the sheriff's office.
Okay.
I believe they have the noise meters that they comes to that, but that's how they would have to do that. It's 50 decibels at the property line. They'd sit in the property line and measure using that device.
And then my other question is about the ag ground that surrounds it. Looks like currently an ag. Is that ag that you manage, or do you lease out those fields to someone else?
I lease them out.
And in terms of just kind of like, you know, public interface versus ag use, I don't have, I guess, a very clear question about it, but just wondering, you know, if in practicality those fields will get used for productive ag, if it's, well, you can't spray whenever there's an event, or you can't run your tractors even though it's the day that they need to be run, or any like kind of thoughts or agreements with your ag leasee about how they operate their ground with a event center right next door.
No, I mean, we might limit, you know, manure spreading.
Sure.
But no, I mean, overall, it's, you know, we interact with ag every day, all the way through our communities. And so, You know, it's a great thing to keep it green and to keep it going, and so I don't see that there's any conflict there.
I think that's all I got.
Victoria,
I just had a quick question. You said something about how there'd be a certain time when you would call everyone in and shut the doors to keep the noise down indoors. What time about do you think that would be?
Was that on the?
It was on the.
I thought we had it on
Which is like the noise.
Yeah.
I think it was.
Which is give or take around dark, I think, in the
I was gonna say that in
summertime.
the summertime, none of us dark.
It wasn't on that. but-
It was 9 PM.
Okay. That
Which
was
is
just my
plenty early.
question, yeah.
And the other thing that we did was we put, you know, it's facing south. So on the south end, our closest neighbor is 3/4 of a mile on Allbergs. You know, and we're quite a ways south even from our closest house. And the closest house, I think, is still 1,000 feet away. So we really tried to get to the center of the property to try to not totally mess up the ag side of things, but to give everybody a good buffer and to get away from everybody so that we didn't cause problems for our neighbors.
Okay, yeah, that was my question.
Questions have been answered. Was it at one time you were looking at 6 rooms and you bumped it up to 10 rooms?
We had, the way it was originally with our architect, we had the rooms all inside. And then because of the fire and the lack of water that was available, he suggested we move it out. So we set it up as 10 rooms in a, you know, an offsite.
So I mentioned of an emergency plan at one point. Do you have an emergency plan?
Call 911.
We get like an emergency, you know, back, I suppose you only have one egress, so. it's a bit moved, but-
Yeah, I mean, we'll only have one egress, you know, as far as everybody leaving, but there's so much room around the property that if the building is burning, you know, there's a bunch of exits, all of them will be marked like crazy. And so, you know, our main thing is just to get everybody away from the building. Everything's irrigated outside of the building. So we just want to get everybody outside the building. I don't really want everybody to leave. I want everybody to get out of the building and then to allow emergency vehicles to come in.
That's right.
There was talk of stormwater runoff. Is this big enough for doing the stormwater runoff?
No, they need to contact state CDPHE, that they're the ones that actually handle that. I believe the parking lot alone is about an acre in area, so typically the standard is if it's more than an acre of land being disturbed, but that would be up to CDPHE to make that
Is that
determination.
hard surface though, or is that, because they're crushed asphalt?
If you're disturbing more than an acre of land, then that's my understanding, but
We're gonna
again,
do that.
that's CDPHE, I'm not enforcing that.
And I contacted my engineer in Montrose and gave him all the plans and the layout of everything. And he did not think that triggered calling, you know, doing that. And that's what he does for a living. So I did that recommendation based on him.
Have you had any conversation with your neighbor, or has it all been through staff and then staff talking about that second egress?
No, I have not talked to them. That property just recently changed hands. At the time that we first came and talked to staff, they were in line to come talk to staff the next week. And so that's where it all came from, but I don't have a problem reaching out to them and to talk to them.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't.
And our traffic engineer did their study as well. And so he's got that contact as well to work on that.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to talk with them.
Sure.
That's the easiest way to resolve things, is talk to them directly. I think that's it for me.
Great. Zach, I had a couple questions. There's been sort of a sentiment about not turning it into an Airbnb or a VRBO. And I think they're legitimate because you're putting 10 hotel rooms as it's applied. And the concern is your intent seems very clear. But if you had someone who came and bought it and they had, and those restrictions weren't there, they could then do it. So I think the condition that we're asking about is that that these are not rented beyond what those events are. In other words, they're not multi-tenant, they're not. and that would transfer to the next owner as well. You want to have something, we want to have something that the next owner is assured of what they can do. That's why those questions there. I know you're resisting putting those restrictions on.
We can tie that language to an event in the main building, triggering those rooms being available. I don't have an issue with that.
Right, so we can condition that says these rooms are conditioned upon use of the venue only and not for any type of long-term rental, that kind of thing. That's what
Right,
we're
yeah,
talking
no,
about.
yeah, I don't want to
Again,
long-term.
I don't think people are concerned with you. We always have to think the long-term
I
of the
agree.
next person, and the next person says, you never told us we couldn't do this. The next thing you know, we've got 10 RVs there parked permanently and 10 people living in the houses. And
I agree
that's-
with
So that
that.
change the character. Our biggest concern is the character of the neighborhood.
Sure.
What are we doing out here? We're putting in a sort of a commercial venue in a primary residential with ag around it, but I think people would call it, residential next to it. It's certainly permitted in the A35, so that the application fits that. You mentioned a commercial kitchen. Again, that would only be used for the events, and we could possibly restrict that as well to say the commercial kitchen is used for the events, not to be leased out to outside entities, that kind of thing. We don't want that to turn into a commercial kitchen where people are coming in and starting to bake. And, there are other venues here in town that they can do that. They're specifically permitted for that. But your commercial kitchen, as I understand, is just for your venue.
Yes, that's the intent of it is to use it.
Well, that's right. And we want to stay within that intent
Right.
for you and beyond. I think that's why we're asking. The buildings you're talking about they're all going to be new, right?
Yes.
So the two-story, are they metal construction? Are they wood construction?
Wood.
You're gonna wood construction. Okay, so I think that's why some of the concerns are about the fire instead of the metal building. So everybody's had a lot of questions about traffic, and it all goes to the awkward corner. You're right on the corner of Testament, that's sort of a tough thing. I don't have so much concern with the egress, because people getting out would be able to look and see, but it's the ingress. So if you go back to can you go put the traffic study, there you go. So you're mentioning if you have a 400 maximum guests, you got 160 cars. If we're coming for a wedding, generally everybody's coming at the same time, 160 or even half of it. If you can get a car in every 10 seconds, that's, 6 cars a minute. That's going to take quite a bit of time just to get the cars off the road. If I'm a neighbor, that pretty much would preclude me ever getting into my property. And I think that's the concern with a lot of people, is that will it disrupt your activity, the neighborhood? And they can't all get in at once, right? I mean, there's a timing of that. So I'm curious to know, is there a way to address that maybe with engaging traffic control? Meaning, are you willing, if you find that, we condition that if we find that it becomes a problem, or there's, generally everything's complaint driven, that you would be required to bring in some type of traffic control, hire somebody to make sure that residents can get through. Nobody wants to wait, out on Testament, which 160 cars or 100 cars would back out onto 1600 road. It could be a problem. And again, I think our interest is, we want you to have your event, but we want to make sure the neighbors at the same time have the ability to live their lives. So that's one thing I'm thinking of as far as how to mitigate that. So neighbors, can get in and deal with that. Something to think about. And I don't need an answer for it right now. I think I mentioned the Airbnb, that's concern. Everybody's brought up the wise. Can you just address the recorded easement? Can you tell us, you said it was recorded today and you got it. Can you just say, what, is that a 60-foot easement to the flag lot? Is that what they have?
Yeah, it's basically from would be the northeast corner. Going 60 feet.
That red line that would go up to that guy's house is a 60-foot.
house.
Okay,
I didn't sign in.
we'll get to
Okay,
you.
this is curious.
I'm just asking questions, and I want you to address these later on when we get to it. Is it actually 60 feet? Because there may be fences, there may
60
be,
feet to the west.
yeah, I guess my question is, it could be a 60-foot easement on paper,
Right.
but is it a 60-foot usable? Because you've got irrigation, you've got uncombobulated water lines, running all over around you, you know?
Yeah, I don't think that it's an issue to, when I looked at it, I don't think it's an issue at all to put 20 feet in there. And that's what they're looking at for emergency vehicles.
Okay. And sir, we'll ask you to address that as when we get to you. Is all of the parking going to be in the non-irrigated ag land?
Yes.
You're not going to use your irrigated land. So is it fair to say the venue and the parking are really a commercial type operation that would really almost require almost a rezone? Like if you had a rezoning of that to industrial commercial, we have an RIC zoning, and then leave the 35, leave the ag as a 35. What we found is we're finding, because essentially if we don't do something, that you're in an A35 and your traffic and what you're going to do for your venue, whether it's 35, but I don't know that we're going to restrict you to 35 events. You could have one a week, essentially. You could have one every day, essentially, is what you could do. I don't think we're going to restrict the number of events you have. It really changes sort of the character and the nature of that. And my concern is I think people need to know that there's not just 835 there, there's a commercial use there. Have you thought about rezoning to a different rezone?
I haven't. I guess that suggestion hadn't come up before you just brought that up. We do this in where our place is in Montrose. My parents' venue is right in the middle of our ranch. And so both traffic coming in and out of it and all the things that have been addressed here have not been a problem at all. They've been doing it for years and there's never been an issue. So
Same size facilities, same number of.
the facility itself is a little bit smaller, square footage wise, but yes, it's able to handle the same amount of people or more.
Good to know. We had a few more questions that people had at subsequent that I want to go back around and make sure we do that before we do it. So Cindy, Artie, we'll get to you.
Mr. Brock, how many
Same thing.
shares of water do you have on this property for irrigation?
I think there's, I don't know that off the top of my head, 70,
Approximately 7.
75.
So it appears that you have, when you talked about building wood buildings, that you might have some limitation on water. Had you considered possibly as a backup using something like a alfalfa valve or something as a backup water if for some reason? What now?
When it burns in the winter.
Exactly. I was just using more. I'm anticipating with probably more of your venue and how I'm comparing this, Hardy, is that we have Lock, Stock and Barrel right up the road here off of 1600 and 5500, which is just a couple of miles into Montrose County. We have Antler Ridge, which is the place up on Kinnikin. We also have Storm King, all in Montrose. All of those properties are actually smaller than the property. Now, the Kinnikin may be, but it has irrigation the same way around it. I've been to all of them on events. And I guess my question I'm asking is that a backup, say during the summer where you're going to see more of the weddings and the outdoor type things, where you're probably going to see more concentration of gatherings than probably in the wintertime?
And I
That's
guess,
one of my
you know,
questions.
and maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but my main thing is to make sure that the people that are there are safe.
That's right.
I'm not worried about the structure. If it burns, it burns.
That's right.
We can rebuild it, we can do whatever, as long
Correct.
as nobody gets hurt. And so I think that in looking at that with our architect and with all the exits that we put into it, that I think that we've got adequate room to get everybody out of it and get it away from the building
Excellent.
without any problem. And if it burns, it burns. I think that that's a risk I take in being in the country and
Mhm.
not having that set up. And I think that that's.
And I think where you have it placed in the center of that property, I think you're mitigating danger to other residences, et cetera. And one, by placing irrigation land around that, that obviously is going to be wet during the summer months. You mentioned sunflowers. Is that somebody that comes in and leases that like a Randy Friend or somebody that who grows sunflowers and?
Yeah,
that's
you're
just- so it's
exactly
just gorgeous. Okay.
Yeah, Randy.
What about on your contracts? And my thought is that with people leaving at certain hours, what about having a contract with those people that are coming in to have that space where you have certain parameters about when they're exiting at certain hours, about noise and things of that caliber? That might be one way too, to address the person who's in charge of that part of your gathering to say, hey, you know what, we have residences off of Testman, we want to keep everybody safe, driving home, noise level, after you leave the building with all the music and whatever, please be conscientious, those people, because it comes down to, for a lot of us, is preserving the integrity of those properties that are around it. But I also am very familiar with many of the structures that you and your family have built, and they have been class A structures. It's not, it's going to obviously enhance, I think, the property values and preserve that integrity. So that was my questions. Thank you.
Lane, you have anything else?
I was concerned about the inadequacy of the ingress, but Artie's gonna address that too, so I'll defer.
Okay,
to
well,
him.
that's the Hardy.
Yeah, few more things now that we're into it a little more. I'm a little concerned on how like we're growing here. When we're being told that there's not even enough water to supply this, is that because of the main line or what do you got going on?
Just to run a sprinkler system, you have to have an oversized line because they can hold a lot of water in a short amount of time. So that is not adequate on that system. As far as running drinking water, bathrooms and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
it's no problem.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think our job is to plan the future. And when we're planning the future with something that's limping along right now, what if the next guy buys the other 80 right beside it and wants to do this again or anything else? I think obviously, you know, if this goes through, the infrastructure needs to be upgraded. I think there needs to be a hydrant like right there. Doesn't need to be in the neighboring property at all.
I think the biggest question for me, Hardy, is are we worried about saving the lives and saving people, or are we worried about saving the structure? Because for me, the wood doesn't matter. It's what we make sure that we do everything, you know, through an architect, through what local and state law is, to make sure that our people are safe and that we don't jeopardize any lives. But after that, then I think that then it comes into question as to what we're doing. And this particular, you know, building is at the very middle of 80 acres. And it's not threatening any other structures. So I think that our water issue, I guess, is a little bit.
It's a growth deal for me though. I mean, I think that you did this, then a church comes in and then something else comes in and, you know, I think the infrastructure's got to be able to handle growth. And if that's another question, like, you know, this is zoned 835. I got to get over that first of all, because, you know, is this called out to put this venue in there or do we need some sort of a?
It's a permitted, staff, you guys answer that. It's a permitted use in the.
Well, obviously the agriculture is allowed use and then lodging is a limited use in the 835 zone. And that's really what the units are. Right.
Yeah, I hear you.
So
But like I said, we're trying to get away from variances, allowed use. Basically, that tells you any zoning in this county, you come in here and get an allowed use and we can do whatever we want. So I mean, I think it's just something we need to look at. I'm not saying against it or not, but just a couple other things like the access. I don't think the access is adequate, but maybe you can prove me wrong.
Have you been out there?
Yeah. Yeah. The zoning, the venue, the road, is the road gonna come, I see this drawing here, but is that road gonna affect the farm field that's already there if you wanna pull the other one up? I mean, this is just.
No, it's
Dan's
the current,
drawing.
that's the current access now.
No, I'm saying the road from that corner to the center of those letters where you're gonna be.
That's where it's going on exactly the same farm road that's there now.
So that field that I'm seeing right there, that's all marked out, where's that road gonna come? Down through there from that corner?
It's gonna come from north to south, down until it hits the trees. And then when it hits those trees, then it turns and goes west. And then there's a set of corrals there now.
Gotcha.
The road
So that-
will be widened though.
It'll be widened, yeah.
So it will take some of it.
So basically a little bit, so that answers my question.
It's not gonna take any more of the field. What happens now is we have a 10-foot gravel driveway.
Yeah.
We don't farm that close to it anyway.
Gotcha.
So where our hydrant is and where our field is and where it was planted this year to the sunflowers that were there this year, there's more than 20 feet.
You not agree that you'd want, if you built this venue and dropped this kind of money, that you'd want traffic to be able to go both ways at all times?
That's why they suggested in that traffic study that they do the 20 feet. They said 12 feet is adequate. And that's why we went with 20 feet. is
I don't
because-
even know if 20 feet is adequate, but maybe like 28.
I
something
think
like
that's
that,
the
you
argument
know.
with the traffic study.
You're bringing in
guy.
RVs and stuff, 2 RVs come at the same time, you know, a county road is more than 20 feet. Right, so I mean, it's just something you look at. I mean, what's another 5 feet to make this right? Knocking mirrors off. The renting it out like an Airbnb, I'm like totally against. I don't know about the folks here, but if this is an event, and I've done some work on some of these events, and they're good. But I think that it needs to either be like an all or none. If we're gonna have a wedding, basically everything you got's gonna be rented out that night, pretty much. I don't think it should be running like if we're gonna rent one building or, one cabin or house or two or whatever. I think it's like all or none, and it's like a big hoorah. And then the idea about the traffic control, I really dig that with TK over there. Just to help, if you got this big of an event, someone's getting married, they're buying those $40 almonds anyways. What's a traffic guy out there with a stop sign letting the neighbors in and out? So I like the idea. I just don't know. We got to get through some of the things as far as the neighbors and the infrastructure to support it. And then maybe a rezoning, because it is a commercial light industrial deal. I don't mind it being in the middle of the ag as long as we're not taking the ag. That's kind of where I'm at. So.
Okay, thank you, Artie. David, questions?
I think I don't have anything else.
Todd, any more?
Have you talked with Tri-County at all to explore what the cost would be to extend the 6-inch main over so that you would have adequate flow?
I haven't. They just said that right now they don't have the infrastructure there to be able to handle a sprinkler system.
So I understand your point of, not being concerned, the building can be rebuilt. I understand that. Obviously, in the event of a fire, we're not talking about a perfect scenario. And I think it is conceivable, if not maybe likely, that in that situation, there may be somebody that cannot exit the building under their own power, where extraction services from fire department would be necessary. And for the safety of firemen, they would need to be able to apply water to the structure. So those are some concerns that I think really need to be addressed. If we could guarantee that when there was a fire, that all that was at risk was the building, sure, let it burn. But if somebody gets stuck inside, that's a huge problem. And having no water available in that worst case scenario, I think is a concern that needs to be addressed. So that's all I've got.
Thanks, Todd.
Yep.
Steve?
Parking lot, gravel parking lot.
Yes, sir.
How are you gonna do dust control?
With crushed asphalt as a topper on it.
Blend it in somehow?
Yeah, just top it all and pack it. It usually works pretty well for dust control.
One of the things that we have used in some conditional requirements for other developments, not wedding venues, but other things that have had impacts in the neighborhood is vegetative screening. And what that means is that trees, shrubs, something of some height planted on perimeters that would give a sight and sound barrier to neighboring properties is something that has made sense, both for applicants and for neighbors and for us. Is that something that you would give some consideration to?
Yeah, so there's already
farming business anyway.
There's already quite a few big trees on that property. Some of them died because the previous owner didn't irrigate it or didn't have it in production. And then as soon as we bought it, we put a line of evergreen trees that are just off to the east of the venue and run kind of like there's a big bank there or big hill that falls off. So closer to Snaffle Bit, that's lower. This sits up higher. The venue sits up a lot higher. And then on the edge of that, we planted a bunch of evergreens already, and we'll do a lot more of that. I think the vegetative screening is a great thing, and we will definitely do that.
I think that would be important, and probably there's some Snaffle Bit neighbors. Okay.
Katie?
No more questions.
Victoria?
Okay.
Okay, Jacob, any more? Okay, with that, I have one more, Susan. Could you just, Carl or Katie, talk to us about, this is a limited use permit. What is that specifically? What does that mean, limited use? Is that stay with the venue forever as under a limited use permit? I'm not quite sure what that means.
Yes, a limited use permit, a permit like this is an entitlement that runs with the land. So once the permit is granted, whatever conditions, the conditions apply, we We monitor condition compliance. But it runs with the land. If they want to change it, then they would need to amend their permit. So say they wanted 20 units instead of 10 or something like that.
The same as a condition.
Correct. It's a discretionary permit that can be approved, conditionally approved or denied. The only difference between a conditional use and a limited use in the land use code is the limited use is an administrative review. However, because of a lot of what we're talking about, primarily the traffic, I wasn't comfortable making that determination at the administrative level, and that's why I referred it to your commission.
Okay, my last question, sort of maybe tags on to some of the landscaping. The venue is sort of at the highest point in the property, which like you say, that ag field to the east drops off considerably. I did go out there and look, although I didn't drive in because I didn't know how to get in. I probably would have driven to this gentleman's house, not knowing how to get in there. I didn't realize the road came down to that east property line, which I think it makes a difference, especially how we control that with the neighbors, how that's done, because everybody's going to be going, if it's at night, 1:30, it's a late night, all their lights are going to be pointing east, turning, and they'll all be impacting neighbors that way. So I'm concerned about that. So noise mitigation is a big issue, and I think we have to make sure we're trying to address the noise. And I think you are keeping them indoors, things like that. But again, it's also at the highest point in that area, and that's going to sort of, how to say, the noise will tend to go further, right? And it's just the nature of life. But maybe we can address that when we get to it. If there are no more questions from the, one more?
Just one more.
One more?
Honest.
Promise?
Somebody asked a question or somebody referred to it. Are you going to have an on-site manager under your employment relationship at all of these events?
Yes.
Somebody will make decisions on site if things go wrong?
Correct.
Then we should get more chances to it. For now, that's the last question for you. Thank you. What I want to do is, I want to ask people in the audience who have signed up to speak, but I'm going to break it into the people who are supporting the project and the people who may not support the project or have questions to sort of speak that way. Rather than me call your name and not know how you stand, let's just ask the people who would like to speak in favor of it, including the ones online. Somehow you have to notify us through a chat box or something like that, that you want to speak in favor. Can I just see a hands of those in favor?
What if we're not against, but not? I mean, I know, we just want to ask.
Right.
You can't ask that.
Well, then that's,
not-
well, I can break it into pro and con, but I'm not asking, I'm not telling you have to discern. If you want to speak, you can speak under any of those things. Okay? We're not going to deny you the ability to speak. That's not a choice. I just wanted to make sure we do it. Okay. Was there anybody online that want to speak in favor of this at this time? Okay, I'll take that as a no. In which case, we'll move to everybody else. Is that okay? Everybody else. And we'll start with Tim Warner. And we have enough people here that I'm going to ask you to sort of consolidate your thoughts into 3 minutes. Something like that. We may put a timer on it if it gets too long, but we have enough people who want to speak that we could be here for another hour just listening to everything else. We think we want to make sure we get through this expeditiously since we've delayed this by a number of weeks. So, Mr. Warner.
I'm Tim Warner.
Could you stand up,
Yeah,
please,
sure.
and then state your name and where you live?
I'm Tim Warner. I live on 1804 Snafflebit Road.
And actually, if you walk up and have the ability to point where you live, that actually would help us a lot.
This
There you
is
go.
me here,
Thank you very much.
and I'm concerned about traffic and noise. Entrance is here. And you're talking about a second egress, which would be out this way.
Just for emergency.
And I'm gonna stop them for these. We'll be encircled with traffic.
Yeah, let me try to speak here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I want you to address your questions to the staff.
Okay.
This is really, this is not a neighborhood meeting.
Okay,
where the applicant has to feel like he has to respond. We'll take questions and then we'll
Okay.
give the applicant a chance to respond at the end
sure.
to all of these questions.
I'm concerned about traffic and noise. So the entrance here, and then if we're gonna have a second egress here, I assume people will do what they want. I've been to these venues. I just had one a couple of years ago for my daughter, and we had 200 people at it. And it was at a country venue, but it wasn't in a neighborhood. And I moved to this neighborhood to be in the country. And now the city's coming to me. So I'm concerned about traffic and noise. Being on the hill, I think it'll be noisy. When there's an event in town, bands playing on Main Street, we hear it at our house. Same thing with the fireworks. So those are my concerns.
Stuart Thompson.
I'm Stuart Thompson. I live at 1901 Snapple Bed. This is our property right here. I've got a couple of three concerns. Number one, there isn't just a road here. This is there's a ditch there. Uncompahgre water users. We take our water out of it up here and it drains all the way down into here and then back and down. And one of my concerns is going to be, if you're going to let people out of this, especially at night, and we talked about having a liquor license, I'm concerned about that ditch. It's an open ditch. It's not small. You could drive a Volkswagen into it. And I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about dust and noise. Like I said, the back of our house faces this way and our bedroom and so forth is on the back. So I'm concerned about lights late at night. I'm not sure how it settled at 1:30. To me, 12 might be more suitable, but I'm also a little bit concerned. I don't know if anybody you've checked with Uncompahgre Valley water users, but they bring a track hoe in here and clean that ditch. It's the only way they've got to clean it. And I think that ought to be considered, because I think the track hoe is gonna mess that road up coming in and out of there. Like I said, that's the only way they've got to use it. So those are my concerns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Janice T.
Yeah.
Is that
I'm at the same,
Thompson?
yes,
Okay.
I'm at
Could
the
you
same
just-
address.
Just state your full name and where you live.
I'm
too.
Janice
Thank you.
Thompson, 1901 Snapplebit Road, Delta, Colorado. On the original public notice, it said south of Snafflebit subdivision was going to be the entrance. And that is not what's on here. So that's a contradiction. Okay, I agree with my husband, 1:30 a.m. with 150 headlights coming out of there is a lot. You know? I think the neighborhood's greatest concern is, where is this ever gonna stop? I mean, I agree with Tim, we moved out there to be quiet country living. That's why we moved. We retired out there. And where is this ever gonna stop? You know, is it gonna be more and more and more? And that's what we're concerned about, the whole neighborhood. I mean, I've sent notices out and everything to, you know, our subdivision. The access to that entrance, there's a concrete coming down from Heinz's, there's a concrete deal. I don't know how that'll be widened unless the concrete ditch coming down where you said your 60-foot easement is, something's gonna have to be done with that because it runs under the road across to the Ridge subdivision, the Ridges subdivision, okay? So that's a problem. That'll have to be totally redone. Not only that, but the end of our ditch, the big ditch, also ends right there at the entrance.
Could you point to this and kind of show us what you're talking about?
The 60-foot easement that he said came off of this property, this is a ditch, and there's a concrete head gate, and it runs catty-cornered across to this subdivision. Okay, and then our big ditch, and it's not concreted, I don't believe, is it, Dan? I didn't think so, but it runs under to this ditch also. And it's a really narrow driveway.
Actually, we get our water out of the ditch, same ditch as you get your water out
Do,
of.
do you? Well,
Yeah.
this one drains across.
Yeah, but it doesn't come into our.
It doesn't
subdivision.
come.
It runs in a
Okay.
culvert across
But
the
there
road.
is a concrete, because my husband and I went up, have been up to look at it. There's a concrete field, and something will have to be done with that. Okay, I don't know what. What else do we have? Traffic, noise levels, headlights, that alcohol control is a huge, I agree with my husband on that. The ditch rights, cleaning and digging that he mentioned, you know, the big backhoe and the dirt. The guy that we talked to, he said, I've stacked this as much as I can for this year. And he said, the only thing I can do if they don't provide a dump truck is stack it on the other side of the road. And he actually, the guy that was digging it actually told us that last year. So I don't know if that's going to be an issue for the right of way or the, you know, because he said, if I can't stack any more on this ditch, he said, I'm going to have to stack on the other side of the road. And we talked to him about that. And I think that's about all I have. I mean, we have lots of other questions like what's going to be planted? Are you going to still allow cows and the manure problem and all of that still in? I mean, you know, we've had cows in there, like, I don't know how many of them, Stuart, 80 or 100,
Yeah.
you know, with all of those issues on the, you know, because they put the electric fence right along. And by the way, our property line is across that big ditch. It runs right across the big ditch, and that's our property line. There's an easement there for the ditch company, but our property line runs across that ditch. And they ran the electric fence along there, and there's been cows on the road that you're going to. So that's an issue. Okay. Who maintains the new road? Obviously, they probably do, but with livestock and drivers and ditch diggers, that could be an issue to keep the dust down. Did I miss anything? Okay. Okay. All right, that's our concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Did you have Uncompahgre Valley comment on this, water users?
We'll get to that at the end. Not right now. I want to go through these people. Put it on a list if that's what you want to ask for at the end. Judy, is it Hayes?
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 Yes, my name is Judy Hayes. I live at 2153 Testman Road. So if I can point that out. So I'll be the first house. This was my little dream house here that we just built. And so that's my concern is the traffic coming in all at once. Because it is a short road, people are gonna come down, actually, yeah, I'm right. Yeah, right here. So they're gonna come, turn onto Testman Road, and then 150 cars all at once, I can just kind of see them stacking up. My other concern is people asking for directions, kind of out in the country. People may not know where they're going, so possibly we'll have people stopping us, you know, because I'm a gardener on that side. And stopping and asking for directions. Where's this venue? The other concern I have is possibly the liquor license. If you're looking at doing a full liquor license, that means you have to have a restaurant. There's specific liquor licenses. I don't know if you've looked into any of the liquor licenses, but because these are all private parties, then you don't hold a liquor license. They can bring in their own alcohol. So is that going to be monitored? The staff that you have, is it going to be trained to monitor people's alcohol consumption? So those are my concerns.
Thank you, Judy. Larry Hudnall?
I'd like to speak on that too.
Larry,
On
the
that
floor.
line with her.
Ron Hayes.
Ron Hayes.
Ron Hayes is right below that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ron, I didn't see your name. Yes, go ahead.
Ron Hayes, 2153 Testman Road. My concerns, and I'd like to remind the planning commission of this, is when Snafflebit was first proposed, there was gonna be 40 houses there. The planning commission knocked it down to what it is now, 11 lots or whatever it is, 9, because of water, the tri-county water or lack of, and the roads. Since then, we have lost use of Testman Hill, which is on private property, and it washed out, which is before the hill on 1600 Road. So there's lost access there to some properties. Also, the fire hydrant issue, the one that's closest,
It's through private property.
I don't know any firemen in the Delta district that would want to drag a hose from here across to that hydrant, just saying, you know, realistically speaking. I'm not against the venue, you know, it's a good idea and Delta does need it, but right now I think it's a little bit of effort after foolishness. I think there's a lot more things that need to be looked at. Uncompahgre Valley Water Users does have 15 feet on either side of the center of that ditch that they have, you know, right away to, and that's water. Ms. Watson, you spoke of using that maybe. We don't know whether we're gonna have that water next year or not, you know, on the farming side. You know, you're smack dab in between two of the biggest feedlots in the county. There's gonna be that issue of the smell. I know there's people that have moved to the country from the city that want to be in the country and they don't like that smell. You know, I'm third generation out there, so I've watched all of these houses go up and been lucky enough to build my own right there within the last year. The other issue I have is the traffic surveys. I've pretty much been there every day for the last 3 years. Where did these people take their surveys at? I haven't seen any strips across the road. I haven't seen any people stopped and parked counting cars. They're welcome to use my driveway. I'll make them a pot of coffee. So realistically, there is a lot more things that need to be looked at here. The signage, there is no signs. There is no speed limit signs on Testman Road right now. On 1600 Road going north, there is a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit sign, or going south, I mean, right about here. There isn't one going north until 75 feet before the city limits. It says 45, and then at the city limits, it drops 35, 25 in posted areas. The other issue is you can't see it on this drawing, but the Y that goes to D25 road on that hill is wicked. I drive a tractor, I drive an ATV, I drive a John Deere Gator on that road, and it is flipping spooky. You can't see either direction. So road and bridge needs to be brought in. They need to trim all of these trees there. Signage needs to be put up. My suggestion would be putting a stop sign, a 3-way stop at Testman Road, or a light. You know, then we can go with a roundabout eventually. So, you know, it just, there's too many things to look at that need to be presented before.
And you got the church activity.
Exactly, and the church is coming too, and
And a school.
And the school.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a church school, just as the one on 348.
And it's coming.
Yeah, there's no questions, and it's gonna be there. Yeah, I just, man, I like progress. I really like the idea, you know, good on you. But I just don't think it's the right place right now. Thank you. Tried to keep it short.
Thank you, Ron. Larry Hudnall.
Larry Hudnall, I live on Ridge Road. I used to work for the county, Jewel Septics. This is going to be a commercial venue. It's going to be over 2,000 gallons. a day because you always measure them for maximum use. Maybe engineer design, maybe secondary treatment. As Ron put up, some of the others, this intersection, there's been numerous accidents. They've taken out the head gate. There is no signage from the county except a couple of arrows. They pull off some other things, but there is nothing there. Or at this other one over here. Fire control, there should be a hydrant over here to take care of it. The traffic, if you're looking at ag traffic, combines,
Maintenance.
wheel drive tractors, they're double wheel. You have crop spraying in the area, especially the sweet corn, it's numerous times, and they're very time specific when they do spray. Just the traffic, no, I'm not for it.
Lightfoots ×2. You don't have to speak, you're just here to listen.
Yeah, I'm looking through.
Yeah, the check, I don't ever go that far, sorry. I'm just
Okay,
going
at
down the
this
list.
point, no.
But thank you for being here. So Zach, you signed it. John and Diane, is it Ailey?
Elmy,
Elmy?
ALMY.
Almy.
Yeah.
Okay, it's your dance.
Yeah, my name's John Elmy. I live at 2694 Ridge Road, which is right here approximately. Next week will be 32 years I've been there. And a lot of people have brought up things that I was thinking coming into this meeting. This has always been kind of a tough corner here. And it's only going to get worse with the kind of traffic we're talking about. Larry mentioned about the head gate's been taken out a couple of times in the time I've been there. People come down this road way too fast at night, miss that corner, go right into the ditch and the head gate. One thing, a question for the staff. I'm sitting there thinking about how we're trying to mitigate these things, but what is the mechanism by which if something doesn't work out down the road, we need to reel it back in and make some changes? Or the aggregate that's going to be the dust abatement gets all put into powder, goes to powder. What's the mechanism once it's been permitted to get that fixed again? I mean, is it incumbent on us making complaints that, this isn't working out the way it was supposed to or intended to work?
It can be initiated that way. It can also be initiated just by staff doing condition compliance and monitoring the conditions.
Yeah, because you know how it is, if anything can go wrong, it will eventually, you think you got it all figured out now, but sometimes it doesn't work that way. The other thing I'm wondering about is, for a lot of reasons, I don't know why we're so, and this is a little bit beyond my specific concern, but why we're so married to the access being on this road between noise, lights, the ditch. This is a really bad alignment to try to get, I've seen people get hung up just trying to get through and onto this little road at this corner. It seems like other transportation planning might be advantageous to access the venue than just accept that road right there with all the problems that have been pointed out. I think there's other options that ought to be explored on how to access that besides that existing road, which I don't think is a very good, it could be better. There's better ways to get here than on that road. So the other thing I thought about is, again, if this is sitting up on the hills, the night lighting, I don't want a shining beacon up there on the hill that's well lit up. Now, there's probably ways to mitigate it, to put it or screening, but that's something that I would be concerned about is that going to be, take away from the setting that we enjoy as it currently is. So I'd say this corner with the traffic and the night lighting between car lights and the venue lights at night is something that I would perceive as being objectionable.
Can I just ask one thing? On the thing it said the entry was going to be south of Snafflebed subdivision. Why was that changed?
Well, we'll address that. It's on the
Okay.
list.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask staff
Sorry.
to look at that because your questions are being looked at. All right, so on my list here is Jerry Kittinger.
They've really covered everything I was worried about. With this one turn up here.
Can you state your
I
address?
Show where you live.
Oh, I live right here. And I'm gonna catch all the headlights coming down the road, because it's gonna drop off and come right into my house. But this road right up here, when you turn onto Testament, I have a 50-foot motorhome and I can barely make that corner. If there's anybody coming, I'm screwed. So you get some big trucks coming down there, you get some big motorhomes, that's gonna be one hard corner for them. And I know the road and they don't.
There's a pole right there in there, Jerry.
There's a pole and there's a hole.
There's a hole.
I found them both.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the online people here soon, but sir, you mentioned that you live in the flag lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know that your name is on the list, but I don't want to pass you over because we said we'd get back to you and I'm trying to be good.
Yeah, they pretty much answered my questions. I thought.
Could you just state your name and that? and where
Danny
you-
Shevner and 2415 Testament Road, I live right there. And I was just wondering how they're gonna open up that road there. They can't take away the ditch, right? They're not gonna take the ditch, okay, that's. I don't like,
Did he sign these?
yeah, and then the noise, it's like, we already heard that.
So I'm gonna, I hope the people online can hear me and I'm gonna call your name and I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself and give you a few minutes to speak. So I'll start with Tyler Housley.
Yeah, hi there. So I'm at 1809 Snafflebit, just across from Tim Warner. My field runs into Testament and 1600. My biggest concern is just the noise, and then the road condition of 1600 is already pretty bad, as Ron Hayes mentioned. So with that much more traffic on it, getting some maintenance on the county roads. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Tyler. Cindy, I don't have a last name, so could you unmute yourself and introduce yourself, give us your name and your address? I'll take that as you don't want to. Sarah Tunget. There you go, Sarah. Could you just?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Sarah Tunget, I'm actually probably the farthest one away. I'm 3192 Ridge Road, so I'm on the other side of Ridge Road. And I've submitted some concerns before, but I would like to kind of reiterate after I kind of rethought of stuff. So yeah, I'm way up there. But my concern is because we've had problems before with Google recommending people to go down Testament Hill. And so we're going to end up with drunk people next to my house. And I have a child and he likes to play, and I'm very concerned that we're going to have to be calling the sheriff all the time with this due to that. And so there's my first concern is kids' safety. We do have numerous kids in the neighborhood who like to ride bikes. We have no shoulders, we have no sidewalks. So we're going to have to restrict them from the county lifestyle that we've been living all this time. So that's kind of lack of infrastructure, and also with the hill coming up to Testament is not great. If you ever driven it in the snow, you know that people like to go off that fence, off of that Y, as everyone has mentioned. Also, as far as the night skies go, I would like to sit out with my son and look at the dark skies. And that's part of the reason we live in Delta County, is for that dark rural sky, which is rated about a 3, if I remember correctly, which is very, very good for where we are in the country. And if he is up on a hill, that light is going to shine. And even if you put hooded lights, that could be a major concern. And therefore that ruins part of the lifestyle that Delta County offers. Then also, I used to help with noise for CDOT, and noise isn't mitigated by facing south. Noise will spread over a certain duration. So I personally think that there needs to be some due diligence by the county and have an official noise study done by exactly where the venue is and for dissipation of how far that noise will travel. Because 50 decibels at the property line, that's a conversation. That's music we can hear from downtown, as other people have mentioned. And then anyone who lives up here knows it is windy in March. March is very, very windy. And no matter what, if you have a fire with dry ground, you're going to affect other properties without having the proper fire suppression systems. So that really needs to be looked at, because we are so windy. We've had times in the past where people have been burning the wind comes up and it starts burning a field unintentionally. So these things can happen. And with houses being so close, it is a major concern, I believe, for Snafflebit to have a venue without the proper fire suppression systems and without having an actual fire hydrant on the premises. And the last thing is what's going to be done about RVs after the event. So I'm gone to many weddings, and just because the event closes doesn't mean the party does. People are likely to go out to the RVs and keep the party going until 3 a.m. Is the sheriff really going to come out every time we call? Or and what is the mitigation for how many calls do we have to make for the sheriff to be able to revoke the permit? And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. There's a Julie online. Would you like to speak, Julie? Yes, you are. You're gonna unmute. Julie, could you give us your full name and your address?
Yes, Julie Hoffman, 2436 Ridge Road. And, I want to reiterate the concerns with traffic. I think the entrance at Tessman should be a secondary. We have logging trucks that come down from 25 Mason Road. We have campers and pulling OHV trailers that come through there. And they come all times of day, and the weekends especially. So we have additional traffic issues without 160 cars coming for a venue. So really need to look at trying to find a way in off 1600 Road. Drinking, that is a big concern with the liquor license. We have houses that somebody pulls out of there, they can just drive right into a house or somebody's backyard, or take a chicken coop out. Fire, that again is another concern. With the winds, you have to have the proper way to extinguish the fires. So that's not something we need to be flippant about. And, the noise, we are a residential area. We're able to sit out on our back porches and whisper and still hear what's going on over at the high school football game. And you're going to bring a bunch of noise into our neighborhood that we're not used to. And I know we have to get used to it. But we need to have some kind of noise ordinance in place. Also, if you're going to have people staying there on the premises, you really have to police them yourself. That they don't start fireworks at midnight, that they don't get to hooting and hollering, and we have to call the sheriff out. So those are most of my main concerns. You're going to turn our residential into a party haven on the weekends, let alone probably during the week in the future. So I'd like to have some kind of way of preventing it from disrupting everybody's lives. And that's pretty much what I have to say.
Thank you, Julie. Can you read me the name for under C?
Claire.
Claire. Claire.
Hi. Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can. Could you state your name and where you live?
I sure can. My name is Claire Hydock. I live at 2739 Ridge Road. On the map with the fire hydrants, I'm the second one to the north off of Testament. Thanks, John. So yeah, my backyard, I face Testament Road. Testament is a busy road. I question too, Ron brought up and a couple other folks about where and when that traffic count was done. It's a busy road, people going to the plateau, the log trucks as mentioned, just people commuting from other subdivisions and stuff west of Testament. People in our neighborhood walk on Testament Road, lots of kids riding bikes, adults riding bikes, people walking dogs. So that's a concern. I'm concerned about the lighting as well. I also moved here because there were no street lights. I like the night sky. So I wonder how the place is gonna be signed also, if Testman is the only entrance. You know, is there gonna be a big old sign there, and is it gonna be lit up all night? Is the road gonna be lit up as folks exit? So yeah, I would appreciate keeping the dark skies dark at night. What else? I'm not opposed to it. It does seem like the wrong place, though. I mean, just because of some of these concerns everyone is bringing up. I think definitely if they could get that easement off 1600 Road, it would be better. That brings up other traffic issues. Traffic issues on Testman, if cars are backed up, you know, so like if I'm coming off of 1600 Road, if I'm not able to turn on to my street, Ridge Road, somebody talked about, you know, waving them by. Well, there's no third lane there. Likewise, if I'm trying to come out of Ridge Road and take Testman out towards the plateau, that could cause a backup. We do have that other Ridge Road exit to the north where Sarah lives, but then would we have people cutting through our subdivision because traffic's backed up trying to go into the wedding venue? And then, more, so just, that law of unintended consequences, some of those things, if they could be given more thought, I think that would be great. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So one more time, I'll just ask Cindy, if you want to unmute. And forever hold your peace. Thank you very much. I want staff to maybe address the lady's question regarding the publication saying this, it would be on south of.
I am not sure of that. It could have been a typo. I know there was multiple notices sent out because it has been.
Excuse me, this is the first one that was mailed to everyone, or not everyone, but the ones that are backed up to what's going on. And I brought
To the bordering properties.
To the bordering properties, yes.
Right.
This is the official one mailed out to us, and I brought it with me if you want to look at it.
Okay. Yeah, it could have been a typo because it's not where the proposed access.
Okay, so it may have been a mistake by planning in terms of what notification was out. Okay, sir, Mr. Hudnall in the corner.
Back that intersection there on Tesman, DMA has some guy wires right next to the road and there is no setback. So that'd be a good thing to look at, or would be taken out, and then take down the power and all that.
Okay, I'm going to come back to Zach to see if you want to address any of these issues, or if you feel like you have. I'm going to close the public portion of it, and then we'll turn it over to the planning commission to sort of decide what direction we're going to go in. But I certainly want to give you a chance to address some of the questions you've heard.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I think a lot of them have been addressed. A lot of them are just regulatory stuff as far as, what engineering has to happen. You have to have an electrical permit, and there's certain specs that you have to have on all lighting, whether I put a house up on that ridge or we put the venue, all of that has to be taken care of. And, the bottom line, I think, is that I want to be a good neighbor. I'm from here. I live here. I've got my businesses here. And it's not my intention to come and disrupt and make things worse. Snaffle's an awesome subdivision. And if I lived in the country or lived out there or had to live in a subdivision, that'd be the one I'd live in. It's a great spot, and I don't want to take away from that. So I think ultimately, I'll just leave it short and sweet. We've all talked plenty, but I want to be a good neighbor. I'm from here. I'm not going anywhere, and we'll just leave it at that.
Okay. With that, I'm going to close the public input portion. Although the gentleman with the hat, did you raise your hand at one point? No. Okay, I just didn't want to ignore you if that's what then we're going to close the public portion and bring it back to the planning. You're more than welcome to listen to the deliberation that we're going to have. And I'm going to ask you that if you need to have private conversations, you take them out of the room, including those on the planning commission. Okay, if you really want to continue your conversation with each other, just take it out because we really want to try to vet this as thoroughly as we can and decide what we think is appropriate, and I don't know where that'll go. So let's sort of go around the room. You heard a lot about the public comments, many of them similar, but some interesting concepts that I think I want to sort of hear how you want to weigh in. Victoria, you have any thoughts on what you just heard for the last hour?
Yeah, so my main thought and concern is with the traffic now as well. I haven't personally driven this road, so I'd like to do that just to have a better idea. But what it sounds like is that there are not really proper like signage on that road. If the turn at the Y is anything like Payne siding, that big circle turn, that's terrifying and that's dangerous. You know, if you have people that are intoxicated leaving the property.
It's worse.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds
we're gonna
really
just
bad.
ask that you
It's blind.
not,
Public comment.
we're done with the public, please. If you need to speak, take it outside.
So,
With all respect, thank you.
I think my main concern right there would be, that there's no signage on any of these roads, it sounds like, including speed signs, you know how that is, with drunk people. I think that somebody mentioned that there might be a stop sign added at the entrance or the exit of the property, I think that's a great idea. I think a fire hydrant, though there are close fire hydrants, I believe that we have a lot of valid points that were brought up that, you know, we're very dry here. This year we had plenty of water, but in the past 3-4 years, we've been in a drought. It is very windy, you know, especially being up on a hill, that's a dangerous point where the wind can kick up and blow ashes any direction. So I do understand the concern there. Also with the ditch that is up there and the head gate. To me, it just sounds like that road and that entrance is a really bad spot and that it might be worth looking into an entrance or even talking to road about putting in a new road kind of towards the bottom of the property where there's not as many neighborhoods. It looks like it's pretty rural down at the south end. And that's less neighbors to have to deal with kind of dealing with the backlash of the venue. It sounds like there is a lot of support from your community and your neighbors that this is not a bad idea. They support it. They're just, like they said, they're used to a certain way of life and it would affect it inevitably, especially with the lighting and the traffic. So I think that those and the fire danger. So I think those three things that we've just been talking about most of the meeting are very valid points. I didn't really hear many solutions being brought to the table, so I think that's something that, you know, I think we should look into and talk about. We might have some in the commission to come up, but those are my biggest things is that there would absolutely need to be, in my opinion, signs added to this road, especially on that sharp turn corner. If GPS is taking people to a hill that's not even any longer there, that's pretty dangerous. And then, yeah, just the ditch, how it was brought up that 15 feet on each side belongs to the water shareholders and there will be maintenance done on that. And would it be possible to leave that 15 foot for them on your side of the property to do their maintenance and still have your 20-foot road? And is there going to be any kind of divider from that ditch? Any kind of like, you know, space between the road and where they would access or?
Can I answer the question? Or do you want me to answer that question?
Sure.
Yes. So the berm is on my side of the ditch. And as I said before, they own across the ditch currently. So, you know, I don't know if that's 5 feet or 3 feet or 1 foot, but there's plenty of room to move it. I just have to move into my field a little bit to keep that access for the water users, but that's no big deal. But and then there is a big berm, so you have to drive, you know, over a 3-foot berm and then into the ditch to get into the ditch.
No,
Okay.
it's not correct.
Okay. Kate? Sorry, Victoria, any more?
No, that was.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm looking at, you know, potential conditions we could put on this that would assuage neighbor worries and still make it happen, because I don't think it's a bad idea. And I do think the projects that you have done in Montrose and Delta, you know, are, I think it would be fitting with the rural character of the neighborhood. I'm most interested in this option to pursue an easement with the good property. That seems like I mean, not to say that's easy, but that seems like that would deal with a lot of complaints. And so I don't know where that leaves us if we table this to another date where that can be addressed, or if that's a condition of our approval, but that to me seems like the most straightforward way to knock a lot of these items off the concern list. Other conditions, I guess I'm looking at would be, would you be amenable to earlier hours of closure? I mean, 1:30 a.m. is a pretty late time given, yeah, I've been involved in a number of other events and things that required party wrap up by 11 or 12, or that music stopped, at least music stopped by midnight or something like that. So I think that's something that we could look into, because yeah, noise, I'm worried about the realistic implications of noise versus just saying, yeah, we're gonna follow the regulations. I don't know that any band out there or DJ out there is going, okay, if I turn my volume to 8, I know it's only gonna travel to the property line, or whatever. So that would be my concern. That's like another one of my main concerns. But I think addressing that with just some hours of operation, maybe even specific hours of operation depending on the day of week. You know, there's just a lot of difference for most folks between a Tuesday, not that most weddings are gonna be on a Tuesday night, but 1:30 a.m. on a Tuesday versus a Saturday is a different story. I don't know that I'm in favor of fully restricting the use of the rooms or the kitchen to tying it to the whole event rental space, but definitely restrict, or yeah, potentially restricting it in terms of short-term versus long-term use, so it doesn't become a full-time RV park or basically another subdivision with constant in and out traffic, or you know, yeah, potentially the next owner using it as a more long-term housing option for folks. Yeah, I think those are my contributions at this point.
Steve?
A quick question for Carl. Is the church being done by us as an administrative?
Yes, a church is an allowed use.
They're not subdividing.
No.
They're just putting it on their own property.
Are you working with them in any capacity in terms of conditions?
No, it's an allowed use. We don't apply conditions on allowed use.
Without-
However, we are working with them as far as access. They are accessing off of 1600 Road. They have emergency access that goes kind of to the north of up to that next property kind of time generally, yeah. But other than that,
Do you have any leverage with respect to county planning influence on working with them on that being a full-time access road to Mr. Proc's property?
no, I cannot require a property owner to have to give an easement. We did have conversations with the church about the idea of having a conversation with the Procs, but it's them, it's a civil or private matter between the parties.
Is there any benefit to the church of having that be open in there that would,
No.
It'll take a little more water that we don't have.
My understanding from the applicant for the church is they're not opposed to it, but they don't own the property. Mr. Good owns the property. Mr. Good is allowing the church to be built on the property. From the church perspective, they weren't opposed to if there was to be an access had there.
so
Let me just put, I think the planning commission, you need to look at it at this point as there is not another access. The only access is off of Testament. So that's how you need to look at this application.
well, I always look at things as that there's several different ways to skin a cat.
Well, but we can't, I'm saying, we cannot require that to be an access. That's somebody else's property.
Yeah. It's called talking to people, I guess, but I won't belabor the issue. But it would solve, as Kate pointed out, it would solve a lot of the issues with regard to Testament. If there was an access in there. Has Bucataway Valley water users and DMEA commented on this proposal? I mean, we've heard about.
It was referred to them.
That I'm not sure of. Based on the comments that are in here, I don't see any from Uncompahgre or DMEA.
I would think that maybe, given what people have talked about in terms of ditches and guy wires and rights of way and all of that, that we may want to go back to them and make sure we have their perspective on the development of this property and how it influences them, which would imply that we may table this for a period.
Is there a plat that shows this stuff? Is there like easements down through there and all that? I mean, how big are the easements? Is the road on the easement? I mean,
There
there's a
are-
ditch, there's a
There are
easement.
UVWA easements on numerous plats, including the snaffle bit, but they were not.
But just right where that road is, what we're talking, are we overlapping an easement right now? I mean, how big is the Uncompahgre water users easement? 20
Right
feet?
where that access is, I'm not 100%
Well, it runs
sure.
all the way from there to there. It runs north and south if there's a ditch there, 30 feet, 30-foot easement. So he's gonna stay 30 feet out of that and build a road. What? Lots of
I'm
questions.
already pretty almost on the edge of it now.
Right, so you're not any.
Maybe I gotta move over 5 feet, but we do that when we construct the road.
There you go. I understand.
Let's,
And
let's
DMEA,
let it go around. I want you to ask those questions when it gets to you.
DMEA.
the DMEA engineers did go look at it and staked it and have it laid out for what we were planning on doing. So their engineers did look at it. I don't know if they looked at that the individual guy wire, but they looked at the rest of the project.
And just, as things are brought up here, they sound like they're reasonable concerns, and for us, I think we need to take that into consideration. And we may need more information from both those outfits about their easements and about their infrastructure. Yeah, I think as we look at the approval or disapproval, there are those conditions of things that have been talked about. Fire hydrants, traffic signage controls. I would add things like sheriff notification for events, so they're kind of consulted. Not that they would be your traffic control agency, I don't think they would not like that, but that they be consulted about events, so that they know that you're gonna have a major event out there. And then hours of operation is might be something we look at, but I'm not so sure that we're not ready to actually do the consideration of this until we have more information on some of the DME and certainly the water users infrastructure and how this all relates.
Okay. We haven't got a motion and we're not ready for that yet. Todd, thoughts? And this is not a time to say whether you'd vote or against, just, additional concerns that you think that the planning commission may take into consideration as far as if we need conditions, if any, if you think the applicants addressed everything, it's a good time to talk.
I'm sitting here trying to put myself in your shoes and trying to think through and I love the idea of what you're trying to do, and, you know, I think one of the questions I'm sitting here asking myself is if, you know, if you were wanting to build an event center in Delta County, that would also involve the purchase of real estate to build that event center, would this be the property you'd be looking to purchase? It just, with a lot of the issues that have come up tonight, I think it's a great idea. I think the county could benefit really from it. Delta County is a beautiful place to come get married to celebrate your anniversary, whatever. I'm having a hard time feeling like this is the right place. And, you know, we had talked about, you know, some of the zoning. And I think, you know, in my mind, the reason why all this property is zoned residential and agriculture is because the infrastructure supporting it is such. But when you see commercial or industrial zoning, the infrastructure supporting those properties are greater, and this property is lacking that. And it just, I don't know, that's just my thought. I think I don't need to beat a dead horse on all the issues that have been brought up, but.
David,
I kind of agree with what Todd just said. I see the access and the fire suppression as being major issues here. And I don't see any real conditions that we could impose to make those issues doable or solvable. I'm a little bit disappointed that Delta County Road and Bridge didn't weigh in on this somehow. As much concern as we've heard from everybody, I think they could have gone out and looked at it. Maybe there are some answers there or some solutions that could come that direction, but we didn't hear it from them, and we're not hearing anything here from the public or anyone else. So I don't know how you get around those by imposing conditions.
Artie.
I'm on the same as Todd there. I don't know about the infrastructure. Another thing is like the way we go about this, I think it should be more like a discussion, because we go through here and a lot of us say the same stuff over and over. I think if we can, once we're in our own time, talk amongst each issue, then people will repeat it over and over. And we might come to some sort of an agreement instead of just going around here and then voting. And that's it. I think there's probably plenty of water if you look into Tri-County, but I just don't think it's probably coming down that corner. I'm seeing 6 or 8 fire hydrants on there. Those hydrants are only used when you're using them. So once you pull, you're gonna pull the trigger on all of them at one time. I think there obviously needs, if this goes through, there needs to be some infrastructure put in here. I think it needs to be rezoned, at least the portion that he's using. I'm having a big problem with Snaffle Bit subdivision being restricted when they, anybody put that in there is probably gonna put more lots like the feller said, and they were restricted there. These guys come in and build $1 million houses. There's probably $12 million invested in that thing. And I just have a big problem with this maybe or may not affecting their house value. That's, I guess, what we're looking at here. I mean, it might do something, it might not. And there's a lot of money that's been invested in the neighbors. And it's not like this is already zoned for that. If it isn't zoned for that and they came and built that and said, that's the way it is. We're bringing that here now for these neighbors to either make them deal with it, because we did it. So I'm having a problem with that. As far as the road and structure, I'm pretty sure when they is Snaffle Bit paved the whole thing? Do you know that? Didn't they do that in phases?
That's basic Crest Estates has done phases.
Okay, gotcha. So I mean, that big of an infrastructure coming in and having to pave, it wouldn't get across the planning commission without paving all that. So I think as far as the access, I would be looking, if I was them, I like the idea, like with Todd, it needs it, Delta County needs it. A better way of getting better infrastructure, and I don't know if it's on this property anymore, and at a minimum, I think you're putting major impact. If you look at the traffic count, it's more than Snaffle Bit by far. So Snaffle Bit's paved, so I don't see why there shouldn't be some sort of a paving and legitimate infrastructure, and maybe even the opportunity to expand. There's a lot of ground there that's not agricultural. If he does and puts that in, if he puts that investment in, maybe to be able to expand more. I mean, if we're going to go in, we might as well go all the way in to have other stuff there. So I mean, that's all the stuff that needs to be looked at. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you, Lane.
Well, I don't like to sound like a parrot, but I don't think there's the infrastructure to support it at this time. And he's putting everybody on the Testman Road in danger, the way I look at it, because like Hardy said, the traffic study done out there is not going to be indicative of the traffic flow that's going to be there for an event like that. Anybody that's watched some of these tourists try to make a right-hand curve, a right-hand turn at a stoplight knows that you're gonna run the back duals over the curb when they make that turn. They're not gonna drive any better here with a restricted access like that. They should have at least, in my estimation, a 30 to 40 foot access for 40-foot RVs coming in there. Because I've seen these RV drivers. And you don't want to drop one of those RVs in that irrigation canal for crying out loud. And if there's any way it's possible to get access at the exact opposite end of that facility, it'd be a whole lot better in my estimation. I don't know if it's practical or not. But anyway, that's just my observation.
Thanks. Cindy?
Well, I do like that 80 acres is not going to be flooded with a lot of homes to where that would look like another huge, huge subdivision. I do believe in looking at architect drawings because we built up on that same 1600, that lighting will be addressed, down lighting, et cetera. It's not going to look like a beacon, I think somebody mentioned, or something of that caliber, and having agriculture around it, I do like. I do believe, and I would like to see a fire hydrant like Hardy had mentioned, especially at that main building. Yes, I agree that if it's a building, let it burn. But I also will agree with Mr. Queen that we don't want anybody trapped in that building. And wood will burn much faster than if it was made out of like a structural steel building with a steel roof, et cetera. I was a little disappointed, or maybe a lot disappointed, that Delta County Road and Bridge has not attempted to mitigate some kind of situation on that corner. I'm very familiar with that corner, living just right up the road from it. I also think that Uncompahgre Valley needs to weigh in on this a little bit as well, just to make sure we have the proper hydrants that we need to do there. I agree that we can't require a future church building to have access to their property. That has nothing, we have no rights to tell somebody what we think they should do with somebody who borders them. So I do agree on that. I would like to see some reduction in speed, and I'll tell you, I have very good experience with that on 1600 road. If you're heading in the north direction, that used to be 45 miles an hour, all down that crazy little hill. I'm very familiar with the Y Hill. I've saved a lot of people who, if we're trying to head north, ended up heading in a different direction, such as east, not realizing they're not on a different road. That hill is very scary, especially when there's some snow on it. But that road used to be 45 all the way to the main light by TDS, and now it's 45, 35, and 25, mainly because of that subdivision that's sitting right across on 1600. So it would really be nice to see possibly that. And I think I've been on a lot of boards where I sign contracts for venues. And one thing I think that we can do is, if you could educate individuals about a contract and what's expected of them, such as reduced speed and bright lights and all that is going to help. I don't know how much late at night somebody's going to maybe always pay attention to that. But is there any chance that maybe, I know that on Snafflebit, a couple of individuals were concerned about lights late at night or early in the morning, depending on how you want to look at it. Is there any type of a mitigation we could do that would not interfere with Uncompahgre Valley cleaning that ditch out, that possibly some kind of a privacy shield fence or something as you're driving down, where we wouldn't be shining lights into those homes at a certain time? So I think that in Delta County, it's a great idea with the venue. I am very familiar with many things that you have built or been involved with. And they are professional, and they obviously enhance property values. But I think we don't, as a group, maybe have as much information as we need to surely make a vote on whether or not we should send this to the next. I think maybe tabling it and coming back and seeing how these other entities pitch in about their thoughts, I think is really important.
Okay.
But I think it's a good idea.
Jacob?
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, they're, so anyway, we want with this, I'm hearing a lot of tabling from the commission. I could see us denying this with, I have some things in the land use code that would pertain to this, particularly in the dimensions, subdivision design standards, where we could effectively support a denial of this, but I do think that you know, Mr. Prock has done his due diligence and he's addressed a lot of this. I think there are with people that have come forward, I think there's more information that we need. I could also see us approving this. I have a list of 6 conditions, including you know, essentially no Airbnb, fire mitigation, music, signage, and a maintenance agreement with UVWA. My question for staff, I know we keep talking about how Road and Bridge did not get involved with this really, but has anyone looked at the southern side of Good? There's only one, there's one house down there. Could we feasibly access from the south and come up the north, east side?
You've got water down there.
You've got water down there.
I think those are open ditches.
There's easements all throughout that area.
What you're looking at on the map is the open uncompounded water ditch on the entire south side.
Unless they get a easement on the church's property, on the private property and come in there. All the lights are going that ways. I mean, it's moving away from all the residential. That's kind of what I think we need to table this, or I don't know, that's a question for you guys. Is that if they want to go back and redo this thing, is it like come back to the table, or is it like table it and like make
Some change.
just like major adjustments like that, or what? How's that work?
Well, I think you need to ask the applicant if he's willing to explore those changes. Otherwise, you make a decision based on what you got. in
Well, I'm
front of you.
asking you because that's the way I'm gonna vote. Like right now, I'm out, but I think it's a good deal. But I don't think conditions like, we're gonna condition you to go find another access is you know, something we should probably do.
Okay, so let Jacob finish, and we'll give a couple of things that I want to address as far as your question, and we'll get back to it.
Well, yeah, I'll kind of hold off, but like I said, if we want to approve, I'm hearing a lot of tabling. I do have laid out conditions. If we were to move forward, I'd probably move those separately, individually, vote on them as a body and just keep kind of going forward. So that's my plan.
So let me just, a few things. Hardy, when you mentioned the discussions amongst the planning commission, we really typically have additional discussions once we have a motion. We don't know what that motion is and the conditions. And once we have those conditions set in a motion, and it's been second, then we have a discussion of that. So if somebody says we want a motion that you've got to, you know, put an access to the south, then we have a discussion about that. So it's hard to do that at this time because we don't know what specifically we're doing. And there's been discussion about tabling, and I'm not going to lead this in, but what I heard tonight, Zach, was sort of a neighborhood meeting, which is really not what we're supposed to do here. And I know some people really loathe neighborhood meetings, but I really think a lot of these questions, I didn't hear a lot of flat out no. I heard a lot of like, hey, I'm okay with this, but I'm concerned about this. You know, from many of the planning commission members, I would like to see Uncompahgre at the table, not just weigh in. I'd like them to see here, like, what are we doing with this head gate here? There's a lot of things going on right at the corner. If they can be comfortable and like, hey, we can deal with it, everything's there, and they can say, I think you'll have a lot of different responses. I think some of the issues regarding maintenance of the Uncompahgre along that, you know, that east property view, I think they can answer as well. Like, yes, you can move that here. Us just saying right out, you're taking your word that, hey, there's room, I can just move my road. We really probably want to hear from Uncompahgre on how that do, because they got to dump their ditch trash somewhere, and they don't want to be burdened like, okay, this guy put a road, now we can't put it on the gravel road. Again, I think these things all would have come up. My concern is the notification and how we, as a planning, so to notify. We notified immediate neighbors. And what we heard is some of the neighbors went and notified other neighbors. And in many ways, I feel like we may have fallen a little bit remiss on that, and because I think from looking at this, traffic just alone is having a bigger impact than the immediate neighbors. And maybe some of the fire mitigations is going beyond those immediate neighbors. And I'm probably the biggest proselytizer of when we send notices that the people who are the neighbors are the ones involved. But when you have traffic like this, and I don't think anybody can sit here and say traffic won't be an issue. The gentleman talked about a 50-foot motorhome, and those are the kind of people you want to rent the 10 spaces to. If they can't get in, that's an issue. And I think all these could be done in a maybe I don't want to say mitigated or some, or what I want to say, somebody mediated. Thank you very much. Thank you. I need someone to speak for me. So that I don't want it contentious, but I do think, that the neighborhood should have a meeting about this, and you can answer these questions. You can say, I'm not doing it, and that's okay. And then you leave it at the table here, and we would make a decision. It could go either way. I'm a little bit concerned when members state how they're going to vote before we have a mission. That's a problem we'll discuss internally, because I don't think that's appropriate all the time. But I think if you're feeling like, and this has been delayed a lot, and here we are coming up with potentially another delay, it's really your call to say, yeah, this is worth a little bit more time getting the people together and trying to answer them, because they repeatedly brought up the same things. How are we going to deal with the traffic? Is it something like, hey, if we get a big enough venue over 100, whatever it is, I'm going to require them to bring someone there to mitigate traffic. I think you have answers for these things that really many of them could be satisfied. Some of the immediate neighbors, maybe there is some fencing you could do in addition that would make them like, hey, that works for me. That we don't really need to get involved in. And then we come back and say, these people say, you know what, this guy has addressed my concerns, and okay, I'll stop talking. Go ahead.
Well, I think a lot of what you said is exactly right, Tom. And part of my problem is that I thought that, and the reason I didn't address some of these details is, like, I have an electrical inspector. I can only put a hooded light on outside lights. I can only do what that regulation says statewide, right? And so I didn't bring that all up because I'm already regulated by them. It's the same with Ontario Valley water users. I can't go and just put a road across them. I can't go and just put a culvert in and change their stuff without doing that and following their guidelines. And so I didn't think that I needed to go and necessarily get the ditch company to come here, because I think that it's all common sense that if I don't follow that criteria and I don't follow those rules that are set out, that are set by people above and beyond us, that I can't do it. And I wouldn't go and take and do a $2 million or $3 million investment and then piss off my neighbors. And all I need to do is go and put some vegetation there and to keep those lights from blocking, or that I didn't put the sign that says, please keep all your headlights on dim as you're exiting the premises. I mean, and maybe that's where I messed up is I overlooked some of the things that I thought were obvious or that were set by other regulatory agencies that were above and beyond us, that we all have to follow no matter what you tell me. I still have to follow that electrical code, or I still have to do those types of things. So, and the other just quick question is on that church, what's the capacity of the church? I mean, how many people are in and out of there, and what's their daily use? Just as a quick.
School. I mean, because there's the
Right,
school
so
there
they're
that's
daily,
regular.
and I knew that they were doing this at school, but then I didn't know how the congregation was, and I assume there's no limitations on that because they're allowed.
Correct.
I just was curious.
They have about 100 parking spaces. Does that sound right? 120.
So they're saying they have about 120 parking spaces. Again, since it's allowed use, it doesn't come in front of us.
I know, I just think that when we look at the whole thing, we still have to look at what that impact is to the road and the community, even though you have no say in it. I understand that completely, but we have 120 cars going out there. There is no traffic study, and like the traffic study is tough for me because I'm supposed to hire an individual that's an expert to do traffic studies. And we sit around this table and we say that what he came up with was wrong. But I'm required by you guys or by Delta County to hire him and spend thousands of dollars with him. But then we want to object with what his findings are. So that's a little bit tough for me in that whole thing.
Well, you're 100% right. If you hire, we ask for a traffic study and you bring one and they say, this is what it is, we don't really have a lot of opportunity to question it. I think some of the other things that were brought up, and I'm not gonna pick on anybody, we don't control speeds on the 1600.
Right.
No matter what we do, we can't tell them
Right,
to
I
slow
knew-
it
I
down.
knew
Road and
that.
Bridge needs to do that. But Road and Bridge was also one of the people that we didn't really hear back from.
Right.
DMEA, the fire district, all these things I think you could solve before it got to us. Because when you bring it to us without that, you see this group is asking all these questions and hearing from the neighbors. You're sort of asking us to put the conditions on them.
I think
And
that
that's
there was
different.
emails back and forth with the fire, with fire on that. And I think that, as she said earlier, that was referred to Chuck, I think,
But he
with
did-
the city.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's hard to say whether it is or not, but what we hear tonight is somebody's in the district and he said, we don't know anything about it. So we take that, everybody's word at it.
Sure.
Everybody's telling the truth. It's really the way we look at it.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, how do you feel right now? Do you think there's an opportunity for you to sit down in a neighborhood meeting, call them in, put them in a room saying, look, we heard from you, and this is, because you can address all these things probably yourself. And
Sure. Well,
without
I
us.
don't, I think that, I guess the way I would look at it is I would need to come back to this board with, if you want that on Uncompahgre Valley water users, I can get them to comment on that. I get DMEA to talk about their guy wire if that's something you want to do. I can't take care of the signage on the public road. You guys can do that.
But you can get.
But I
Road
can
and
put a stop
Bridge-
sign.
You can get Road and Bridge to certainly weigh in a little bit more on like, how are they gonna deal with this?
I believe that they were asked and they
Yeah,
had no comment.
They didn't. Well, I don't know if they had no comment. They didn't weigh in. So I think we're putting that back on you.
Okay, I can
Get some of those things like, hey, you guys gotta respond.
So I can do those if there's I don't know if somebody in this group does a little list and says, these are our hot spots and do this and come back to us with this information, Zach.
We can do that.
And I come back and give it to the board.
Right, so we would make a motion if I'm hearing this to continue it and have you address certain issues and then have you come back. I think one of the things that was mentioned that was hours of operation, I think we want you to address the hours of operations. And there's a number of suggestions that came out of here as far as agreeing, again, we're looking past you. Somebody's, wants to buy this for 10 million because you're spent 2, God bless them. But we want them to live with the conditions that we've all agreed to as well. So it could be addressing it like, hey, the music will stop at X amount, or the liquor will stop at this
Well, I
amount.
think the liquor,
But,
the liquor license.
and it may be that, and those may be the answers that we just don't have clarity here today.
Yeah.
And those, I
Like,
think.
like if we have a liquor license, I have to have somebody there that is certified, that makes sure that, somebody's not overserved, that there's nobody even under 18. I mean, I've got to go through classes with all of that. And that's in order to,
So it came up with that if you have a liquor license, you have to be serving food. Is that, somebody said you have to have a restaurant. I don't think that's true.
No.
But you have to serve food. Is that not true? Okay,
Yeah.
so I think just clarifying some of those issues will really help, and then it'll help us. Because I'm not really hearing overall no, I'm hearing like, we just don't know enough to give an answer. Is that fair, everybody? I don't
think
want to
that's
speak for
fair.
everybody.
I think that's
One of the
fair.
things that I think would be important for me at least is to hear from Tri-County, once you ask them, how much is going to be an extension of an 8-inch line and a fire hydrant, either to the edge or to the building itself. So we have that in consideration. Now we have some fire price and all of that, but that's something you probably would want to do, look at that cost and bring that back as information to us. Does that make sense?
Sure.
My question is, if he gets us some of these simple information comments from some of these entities, do we want it to come back here? Do we just send it along with our conditions, along with the comments?
Well, I personally would like us to make a decision on this. I mean, again, what we have here is an opportunity to talk about property rights of a development applicant
And neighbors.
and property rights of neighbors. And what we do, there's property rights competing. We tend to arbitrate those
We go back to the book.
I wanna make sure that everybody in Delta County understands the land use code. Some of you have been looking at the papers and hearing about no land use code. Well, this is the land use code at work. And this is arbitration between property rights at work, it's something we do, so I don't want that to be wasted amongst anybody, but that's what this is. I would like the opportunity to weigh in on this as well, rather than send it on time.
So if somebody would like to make a motion, we could have a motion to approve with conditions. If there are any, we can have a motion to deny. We can have a motion to table and have it come back to us with some answers on the condition. Or the approval with the conditions that, I don't know how we're going to adjudicate whether they've addressed those conditions if we move it on. So if we put in that we need to hear from Road and Bridge, and he goes to Road and Bridge, how are we ever gonna know? I'm just asking for.
But we
some-
could potentially approve it with conditions and send it to the Board of County Commissioners to then validate those conditions.
That's what you're asking, so.
I'm asking.
Yes, that's essentially, if you approve it with those conditions, is where it goes.
I wanna-
It goes,
I wanna
it
hear
has
Jacob's
another,
conditions.
it has another public hearing where the neighbors get to come in and do exactly what they did here. And then Mr. Prock would be able to address them. And that's maybe sort of what Jacob is suggesting, Steve, is that we would vote however we're gonna vote with those conditions and leave that with the Board of County Commissioners to hear. You won't hear
Yeah.
unless you go.
Can you tell us the conditions again, Jacob? Would you be so
Well, we can
kind?
talk about the
Well,
conditions.
it's everybody's condition, right?
You know,
Yeah,
it's-
condition.
That's right. So the conditions, Jacob, write a list, and if you think we're missing something, speaker for everyone, please go ahead, Jacob.
Okay, I think the way I want to go through this is I'm gonna just move them forward. I'll need a second. If we can agree, we just do a quick vote. And then we'll keep that condition. We'll kind of go down the list. And then I'll make the full motion, but that's kind of the way I want to do, rather than saying my 7 conditions and we get lost.
So you want to do a
inside that.
condition by condition?
We do.
I got you.
And then we can add or.
Yeah.
There you
So first condition, condition that rooms be rented out only for and around events. And if there is intention to rent them separately, a separate application through Delta County for
Okay,
a separate facility. be
I
fulfilled.
like it. Do we go
Let-
around
let-
by
let's-
each person?
Let's,
Just
well,
like move.
You could
I
just
need
do
a
a general
second.
I second
consensus.
that.
So just for clarification, these are conditions for approval or disapproval, rather than conditions for further information.
I'm gonna put in a condition for further information. Personally, I'd like to move forward.
so.
Yeah, I think we got a job to do. I just.
What he's asking, he's asking that he would make a motion to approve, subject to these, is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Puts more weight on commissioners, but.
and it gives the public another hearing to make sure these conditions.
Well,
are
it's short
met.
the circuit for him. There's no doubt about it. We wouldn't have to come back in 2 weeks and do our
That's right.
job again, but our job is our job. And I mean, it's been referred to us to do something. right?
Well-
I thought that something is to try. to
Again,
clarify
Jacob can
something.
do this in a motion, and then he can, and you can get a second, and then we'll just decide it. Or he can do it as you suggest, and talk about each condition and sort of get general consensus. If you don't have to agree with them, and ultimately you can vote against the motion as well, if we get a motion a second. So
Well, alternatively, Mr. Chair, somebody could make a motion to table it or deny it as well.
that's absolutely right. Right now, I'm hearing.
Well, I would make a motion.
Right now, there's no
to table
motion
it
on the
with
floor.
with conditions on information you still would like back from the applicant or from others.
And I would second that.
Golly, I'm not supposed to let people know when I vote, but. I
Well,
like what
wait,
you're saying.
one sec, Hardy. One sec. We have a motion to table and a second. And essentially now we have a second, we're gonna discuss it. I don't have any conditions attached to that.
We have some. on the
Now
table.
you wanna make a motion, because you didn't make it in your motion. You just made a motion.
Well,
to table. You just made a motion to table.
I would make it,
You wanna make a motion?
I would
to
make
table?
the motion to table. And part of that motion would be that we require further information to consider this in 2 weeks at that meeting that would occur. And those would be things like DMEA comments or participation in discussion. Most importantly, Capagua Valley water users, I would personally like to see a fire hydrant, cost and location information.
Do we add to this stuff or what?
Supplied.
He's made the motion, so you can talk.
Can I add to your motion like zoning? Were you thinking about like rezoning this section? And do like.
Yeah, I'm not with you on that.
We just
I mean,
leave it
he's
in?
got a right to do this
We leave it,
without rezoning.
I didn't think he did. Does he have a right? Is this?
Yeah.
He does.
In
If he does
A35?
this hearing right now.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, it's,
So any A35 can put these in there.
yeah.
Technically, Carl could have approved it without us.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's my fault.
I guess I would like to hear,
So I have
Zach,
DMEA uncombobulated water fire hydrant in your motion. Anybody else?
something on lighting again, about what, I mean, I've heard the comments about lighting can only be done externally on hooded lighting. But he may have more ideas about that. Don't know. See,
It's just a code.
That's a statewide code.
Based on the electrical code.
the road and bridge, comments on traffic. I personally would like to see road and bridge comment on road impacts, if any, because we have been known to do conditional requirements of road impact fees. Don't know that they're necessary here, but I'd like to hear road and bridge comment on that. About road damage and therefore having some sort of essentially a bond for any road damage that may be linked to this project. And then we said hours of operation, that they would come back with some idea of how that would maybe work differently, given our thoughts about that.
Okay, anything else? So I'm gonna void the first motion, and you would need a second on this for all those things that you want to see in the table, DMEA, uncombated
Well,
water.
I had a
fire
second on the
hydrant.
motion, Tom, come on.
No,
What
you
about
didn't,
like the
you
visual?
didn't have a second on this
Well-
motion because you didn't address all these issues.
Well, I did,
Your
these are
second-
ancillary
your
parts
second
to the
may not-
motion,
Your second may not support.
continuation of information that we'd like to see.
But your second may
And you're
not support
belaboring
that.
this a little too long and arguing about the damn motion. I made the motion, it has a second.
Doesn't
There are
have a second.
conditions as part of the motion.
Just ask it, would you second these?
I would second.
Okay, and you have a second.
Great.
Now we'll have a discussion.
So this just brings us back to the table to go at this again. Is this not the only things we're talking about?
If
Do we add
if
stuff
there's a
next
vote
time?
ultimately on to support this motion,
Under those,
it would get tabled with those conditions.
and that's it.
And he will
He
come back
does
with
that.
It would
and
come
he's
back to
done.
us.
But like, if there's other ones, like this being a venue only or not, like you were putting out, that's not in here.
I don't hear it in here.
That's what I'm saying. Can we add these to this? or-
These are just like a request
Yeah.
from him of more information to bring, not conditions of the approval.
But if he
We might
comes
as well-
back,
So
we might
if
as well
he
get the
comes
rest
back,
of it.
if he
There
comes
you go.
back, we can say, okay, you answered our questions. Here's our conditions.
Yes.
You can't X, Y, Z, you have to X, Y, Z.
but we wouldn't have new motions at that point. It would be just the conditions that we're stating right now in this, correct, TK?
No, when he comes back to us, it's a new hearing.
Right.
It's a public hearing and it's starting all over as far as what we make a motion to approve or deny or anything. We could table it again if we didn't think it was answered, but it would be a new hearing.
But
Well, I'm not
Carl,
looking to waste
staff,
anybody's time.
the way you started was that you were looking to approve this when we first started this evening. I
Well,
just,
if there was no controversy. I mean, the way the land use code is written is if I refer a matter as a limited use permit, it follows the conditional use permit process, which is a recommendation from the planning commission to the board.
Okay.
As a limited use, if there was no issue with it at the planning commission, it could be referred back to me for administrative approval, technically. Procedurally, in this case, based on what I've heard with the public, I would recommend that this go forward to the board with a recommendation.
instead of having them come back in 2 weeks,
Well, no, I mean, whether you do it now or
or in
later,
2 weeks,
or in
but
2
have a
weeks.
recommendation to the board, even if he comes back with addressing these conditions that Steve set forth and we're second. From there, we could do a recommendation moving forward.
Yes, to the Board of County Commissioners.
So we go back to Jacob. And maybe like what we were originally doing.
My discussion for this is I think we can address pretty much everything, move him along. So I would be against Steve's motion to table.
I'm against it too.
I am too.
Okay, so,
So
all
am I.
right, if we.
Let's work through it though. I just want to make sure
There's
everything's
less
in there.
discussion.
Okay, so let's go around, because we're in the discussion phase of the motion, and I want everybody to weigh in. You really want to hold off how you're gonna, no, you don't have to hold off.
I want him to tell us what
At
we're
this
doing.
point, now's the time to say how you feel.
So.
So Jacob, how do
No?
you want to say anything else?
No.
Okay, Cindy, how do you feel?
I would like him to go through each one of his points, and I would like us to address and move forward on each point.
Are you in favor of the motion or against the?
I am not in favor of the motion.
Lane?
I was trying to listen to Jacobs when he was presenting at the first time and he got rudely interrupted. You never heard all of his so-called conditions that he was going to propose. So I'm against that motion and I want to hear him finish his spiel.
If this motion fails, and we're gonna guess that's where we'll start. Hardy?
I want to go back to Jacob and just make sure we have a chance to get, after I hear his, if there's anything else to put in there, we'd like to add it, and I'm on board.
So as far as this motion is concerned,
Yeah, there's not enough in there for me.
Okay. David?
I'm okay with the tabling, with some conditions. I think Hardy's got some more conditions or things that we should be addressed if we do table.
But maybe we have to do another motion after that. Let's get everything on the table. Scott?
I am for the motion and would like,
Todd?
actually, I would like to amend the motion to include Delta County Fire District 1.
Right.
Okay.
And I am for tabling it because I think we have not heard enough to even set forth the conditions that would be necessary to give an approval. We need to hear more. We can't have that conversation tonight.
Steve, we know how you feel.
Yeah, but I want to add something more. Sending something to the commissioners that's an unfinished product, meaning that we still have questions about it, so we're gonna put these conditions and then you guys make, is really not serving them very well. And that's why tabling does make a lot of sense. I know what you mean. I mean, moving it along for Mr. Proctor's interest would be great, but this is an unfinished product. We need more information ourselves. And it's unfair to them to send it forward.
Okay.
without
Thank you.
that.
Kate?
I'm a little torn, I guess, but I would be in favor of tabling it if there could be a good faith effort to explore alternative access through another easement. That's probably not gonna get accomplished legally within 2 weeks or whatever, but I would like that to be I would like a good faith effort, or even Mr. Good to weigh in on whether he's amenable to that at all, because I think that would be a major solution. So I'm in favor of tabling it if we can get some more information.
And
on that.
I would be favorable to that condition as part of my motion.
Victoria, how do you feel?
I'm going to agree with the motion. I also would like to amend it, like Steve was just saying, to add in, and like Kate was saying, an effort to explore an alternative entrance to the property. Because that is the only thing that seems to make the most sense to solve a lot of these issues. And I think also it's worth mentioning that this is our job. You know, our time is, that's why we're here, is we're volunteering our time to do our job. And our job is to also consider the community members of the surrounding neighborhoods and not just one folks' time. So I think that because it's such an extremely big deal for these people in their lives, that we have the duty to dive further into this and really understand what we're trying to pass or not pass. Because I don't think we have all the information. I haven't driven this road. I don't know if everyone in this room has, but it sounds like there are some major issues on that corner. And so for us to just say, okay, well, we're gonna approve it with this condition, that's not a solution. That is now sending an unfinished product, like you said, to the Board of County Commissioners for them to revise and send back to us because it's not finished. We're not doing our job if we're not coming up with a reasonable way to either approve or deny this. That is fair for everyone involved. So I would agree with the motion to table this under those conditions and add also that there is an effort to find an alternative entrance to the property.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just not in favor of this motion. I think it's a crappy motion. I'm in favor of us doing it again. I'm in favor of going back to Jacob before someone makes a motion, before we have all the conditions that we want, because we made a commitment to Mr. Prock that we would give him a list. And we made a motion that to me had 4 amendments here. And I think we just need to do a better job.
So can we friendly amend this motion?
Well, I think we
to
can
make
start all
better?
over personally. I think we should start with Jacob when he had his list and we didn't get finished with that. And
But
go
his
around and
wasn't,
make sure everybody has their concerns of what they would want addressed
Listed.
for Mr. Prock
Yep.
in that motion instead of just
We
like,
have a motion on the floor.
That's correct.
right.
TK is
okay,
arguing
so
to
I'm-
deny the
I'm
motion.
allowed to speak toward the motion just like anybody else.
Yeah, but you can't make a decision not to consider a motion and to consider that motion.
I'm telling you that we can, I'm telling you why I'm voting against.
We'll vote against it.
I feel like the discussion time is the time when I'm allowed to be able to speak as to why, just like everybody else. And
And
that's
we'll
why I'm doing it.
return the process, vote against.
All those in favor of the motion as presented? Raise your hand.
Can
Raise
we
your
get a
hand.
recap of the questions
Can
we're
you? I
asking
don't know. Ask
to?
Steve, he made the motion. What's the recap?
Well,
No, what's the recap, Steve?
that's what I need to hear is what's going on. I just have other stuff that I think isn't in there. I'm not saying I'm against
Let's recap.
it.
This
It's
is
your
getting
motion.
into antagonism. We have a motion. I put those out there. I thought
Mr. Chair, if I
he
may,
was
I'll try
actually
to
trying to
capture.
make some keeping track of them. I've got track of them, but I don't want to be antagonized against the chair.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, so what I understand is the motion is to table the matter to obtain further information and come back in 2 weeks. The information has to do with the the District 1, the fire hydrant, an infrastructure perspective, access, traffic, is having an effort to exploring an alternative access. More information about lighting, the DMEA infrastructure, the UVWA infrastructure, the road infrastructure from Road and Bridge, whether or not they feel that there would be road damage as a result of this and therefore potentially an impact fee, hours of operation that could mitigate some of the noise concerns, information about liquor license with or without food, and then an estimated cost for Tri-County extending a 6-inch water line, which would kind of go to the fire hydrant question.
And under the.
Did I miss anything?
Traffic, zones, you had signage.
But I have a question for you, sir. We're talking 2 weeks coming back. I mean, you just listed an armload of items that any rational person that would be difficult for them to get all of those, hold on,
Ask Mr.
hold on,
Brown.
Steve. All of those answers back. That's a lot of people that he has to get together to be able to come back. Do we believe that 2 weeks is fair for him, or would we want to be able to give him a little extra time? And I think that would be a question more for Mr. Brock or to you.
I don't think there's any requirement that these answers come back in 2 weeks. We're gonna have meetings every 2 weeks. If it's a month from now, if it's 6 weeks from now, if it's a year from now.
Well, but I'm just saying, I think
He has that
there's an
information.
envelope
He can
there.
come back to us.
He would be still on the agenda for 2 weeks from now, and it would be up to him to decide if he wants that to remain on the agenda.
So I think, Steve, did you touch on the venue being just used as whatever they want to use it as? Airbnb, hotels, or anything?
That was the
in there?
first-
That was part of it.
That's in your motion, because he didn't say it just now, right?
So I feel like we've gotten an answer about his intent. I don't know that
But
we
what if he
can.
sells to the neighbor though?
Right,
Well,
but I think that can be a condition of our approval.
That's why I
but
did not
what
include
more
that on my list.
information Is he gonna bring to us?
We do that next time.
Yes.
Gotcha.
There you go.
That will be.
All right, okay, then let's have a vote. All those in favor, say aye, or raise your hand. Based on Carl's thing, all those
Five.
opposed? 1, 2, 3. 3, motion passes.
Yes.
2 weeks.
And then just procedurally, if Mr. Proc doesn't feel like he's ready with these,
He could request. a
he could
continuance.
request a
Like a
continuance
continuance
until
at
the
some point.
Okay.
That's what my question was, is that if you can't get it in 2 weeks, that's a lot of arm load to be able, and I don't want him to, it would be unfair for him to come back and say, well, only half of these people actually responded to me, and here we are again at an impasse. So that's why I was asking that question.
So Zach, I would get the motion that was made in writing from planning, and then you'll have a list. That's fair.
We'll be in touch.
And then I have a question, I guess, for staff, just in terms of how this works, you guys send out a request for comment. I agree, we need some of this information, but like, I can't, I guess I have been assuming if Road and Bridge doesn't comment, they don't have a problem.
That's not right, though.
But I think we've all expressed disappointment that this is a case that perhaps they needed to pay more attention to, but, yeah, I guess I do wonder how much is incumbent on the applicant versus the departments
This is supposed to be.
taking taking your request for comment seriously and yeah.
Procedurally, what we try to do is when we put a referral out, we, some cases we ask specific questions, because we have questions as planning staff. If we get back with no comment, or the fire district referring us to the fire chief and at the city, sometimes we will follow up. There was some follow-up communication back and forth with fire.
Yeah.
But if UVA doesn't respond, we don't necessarily call them and say, hey, do you have any comments?
And I think just going forward, the applicant also, why would we expect the applicant in their first round of application to say, well, I haven't heard back from UVWA, I better call them and make sure they give me a comment on this and say, so I think there is information that we want and that will help us, but I think, I don't know, just in general, moving forward, I don't think that it really is incumbent on the applicant to like chase down these leads if.
I think this, the rest of yours is like an internal talk. I think I'm good, so I understand. I'll be in touch with Carl and we'll get to the bottom of it.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
See you, Zach. My response to that is, if I'm an applicant and I meet with the neighbors and I hear what they said today, I know I'd be willing to go to you, Uncle. I want to be going to DMA, not
Perhaps
letting.
behooves him to, but.
Well, yeah, because he heard the importance of the ditches,
Right.
the crossings, in other words, all the things that we heard tonight. It's like he didn't address before this, and he could have. And I think just to put the application and make staff, I got a staff to it is the wrong approach. If he had done it himself, he'd have the answers. And he doesn't have the answers because we're not getting the answers. Right. So once he does make the application, it is sort of our problem. But once, if we've asked him to have a meeting with the neighbors, and I don't think we've noticed it, right? I think as far as I think the impacts were bigger than the immediate neighbors. I think we said, hey, here's where you really need to do it, because we can draw on a map where everybody who spoke tonight came from. And those people really could be noticed, and he could have a meeting. Exactly.
But where, like, whose responsibility is that to decide in the first place? Our land use code says a certain level
Adjacent
of
neighbors.
outreach. Is that,
Well, no,
I hear what you're
you have the
saying.
ability to expand the notification, don't you?
I have, it's not explicit in the code, but I have, and where.
I just think that's a bigger philosophical question about who should be noticed and are we requesting them to do neighborhood meetings? I understand what you're saying is it behooves the applicant to do a neighborhood meeting, but nowhere in the code says he has to, and there's.
That's in the update. It's in the amendments, yes.
But where do we come off? I mean, I'm sorry, you know, we've got a school coming in with a church, but yet we don't question their impact.
Actually, we did.
Okay, good. I'm
To
just- I
to be
mean,
fair,
there's probably at least gonna be 100,
they were,
120 cars.
they were also required to do a traffic study.
Okay,
And they used the same traffic engineer for their study.
okay.
Is the
Um,
school gonna need a hydrant?
What's that?
School gonna need a hydrant?
Well, there is one right
There's
across.
one right across the street.
Right.
They have a different situation.
It should be on the corner of the building or something here. I mean,
It's within 1,000 feet.
within
The fire standard is within 1,000 feet. The difference,
Standard doesn't mean it's
But it's
right.
if I may, the difference of the one that's in Snafflebit is you have to go through a private property to get to the fire
Right.
hydrant.
My kids in
versus
that
across
school,
the
I won't
street.
run on the
Hardy,
corner.
let him finish, please.
Oh, I'm done.
No, go ahead.
I just was asking Carl how that worked, you know, being that you got a lot of impact going on there between this proposed venue as well as a church and a school. It's not just gonna be used as a church, maybe just on a Saturday or Sunday, you know, obviously if it's a school, we're probably gonna see a lot more impact throughout the week as well. So just a question that I had more than anything else.
And that's why we did try to have conversations about access with them, but at this point, it's
Okay,
not there.
thank you, appreciate it.
So I have a question. Obviously, I'm new here. I have a lot to learn about land use code and all of this. One of the questions that I have is obviously at this point where we have an applicant at the table trying to get something passed, making changes to land use code is probably not gonna happen. But in situations where with a 1,000-foot fire hydrant, Hardy, I completely agree with you. In my mind, it makes a lot of sense for certain applications, schools, wedding events, things like that. Maybe it should be proposed that we change that code to where it needs to be a lot closer. How does that process work? How are we involved in that? I've heard a lot, of course, in the news lately, how all this stuff starting wanting to change, but then we have this conversation, we're like, well, that's what the land use code says. It's like, well. So my question is, how does that process work?
So
Common sense.
it's why
We're
we
here.
make recommendations to the Board of County Commissions on revisions to the land use code. When we get people like yourself who have a specific idea that like, maybe we should change it. And if you get support for that, which I'm sort of hearing you can, we would make that as a recommendation. What's happened here recently is people have gotten vehemently opposed any of the changes that we talked about for the last year that are reasonable, just like that. And you know, that's how it works, you know, it goes to them. You know, I don't know what they're gonna do. I don't, you know, they could send it back with either accepting it, denying it, making recommendations and changes that they want us to address. I don't know that we have the ability to go beyond what their recommendations are. If they don't bring up what you say, then we can't do it. We'd have to wait for them to get to a point where they've got something adopted, and then we sort of start all over. We have a list of things that have gone on past what these revisions are. We didn't get incorporated into this land use code. And we think that's what makes, having used it like this, having put in conditions or changing the land use code, that if you're changing it to commercial use, you change the zoning so that somebody reads it, they do it. We don't have that in there. That's how the land use code gets changed to represent more of your community. I'm so sorry, Lane, I forgot you. Go ahead.
It's all right. I was just gonna bring this point up. This is not the first time Road and Bridge has basically refused to offer any kind of opinion at all. And a lot of times that kind of screws up our decision making. I was just wondering if Carl could use his influence with the county administrator. Maybe she should send out a blanket memo when one county entity requests some information or a reply, you damn well better do it.
Well, and to add to that, if I may, because of the conversation, I will ask the traffic engineer or the county engineer be here at the next meeting to help answer some of these questions. And maybe a little bit more to Todd's question. So from the land use code perspective, it really just says we rely on the fire district's recommendations.
Case of beer, you're good.
Without going into, is it a building code? Is it fire code? You know, because that starts a whole other conversation that is.
It's a moral deal. There's a bunch of kids in the school, there should be a fire hydrant beside it. I don't care what that code says, but that's just the way it is.
Thank you.
But we don't regulate sprinklers, right?
Fire, that'll be in the fire code.
That's fire. Right.
That's a state, fire code. though.
They would hit them before they even get there, because they'll have to do all that stuff, but we're not even requiring them to have a fire hydrant.
So we're gonna have them come back in 2 weeks. You're gonna have a,
I'm gonna have a powwow
Information of
with
what he
Mr.
needs.
Proc and
That works.
we'll go from there.
Yeah, this was a lot more complicated than just an event center. I mean.
Yeah, definitely more complicated than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Just reading the application.
And my question goes to Steve's point, that this is what the land use code does. And I would say, venture to say that everybody who's against it has never come to one of our meetings. Understand what we do. And I mean, I think everybody does a reasonable job generally.
Yeah, what we do is not always perfect, so.
well, and I think
I mean,
the clarity is that whatever we do here and it goes to the Board of County Commissioners, it doesn't go from the Board of County Commissioners back to us. You know, so I think that everybody needs to understand, you know, as we talk about that, is that we propose, we suggest, we don't pass, we make recommendations, I guess would be the best word, Jacob, that we use. And so that's what we all have to, and I think we all have to kind of think out of the box, you know, we think about those residents, we think about the integrity. But
One of the things that we always seem to believe is that we don't want to do community meetings here.
But it always happens, Steve.
It always happens, and I gotta tell you, my personal belief is that it works out for the best. If it doesn't happen before, it has to happen here. It's a cathartic way to get stuff out. It's cumbersome, it's messy, it's aggravating, but what happened tonight was very important.
It's like a mediation. I think a mediation, it works well because at the end, public comment happened. We went back to Mr. Brock. He got a chance to answer without public comment coming back in. I think it's an organized mediation. It'd be nice to see some of this stuff kind of be sifted through before it gets to us.
Yeah.
But that's the perfect world which we don't all live in.
Yeah, but again, my point is, if I'm an applicant, which turns me into a developer,
Right.
as a developer, it's my honest, it's all about the neighbors. I mean, every time we sit here, it's
is.
always about the neighbors. And if you're coming to
Yep.
do something, and this was a lot more complicated, the onus is on you, like, okay, I gotta deal with neighbors. I say you need to do this so that we're not having that neighborhood meeting. I want to hear that he has met with them and that he's answered their questions. These people have legitimate questions that he could have heard long before this. And they would have spoken up and he would have answers for them. He didn't really have answers. He just said, I'm going by the code. I think he could have had better information on lighting. An example, what's the lighting gonna look like? I think he didn't address his hours of operation and it came up over and over again. He could have said, I'm not gonna go past noon or my alcohol is gonna finish at 11.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have
License
to,
says
we don't
hours.
have to mediate that.
Yeah.
We shouldn't. We are. It's not, it's why we're here at 8:30 and I don't think we should anticipate.
I agree.
I think it's teaching the applicant as developers that they have an obligation to defend here. All right, any other department reports?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. So can we hold on a second? I want to almost done here.
So I want to report primarily the land use code update, where we're at. The Board of County Commissioners is having a special meeting next Tuesday, 28th, 4:30 to 7:30. And it'll be at the Performing Arts Center here in Delta. The agenda went out and it includes a red line with some additional edits of some of the planning commission has talked about, some responding to public comments. There will also be a work session with the board from 10 to 12 a.m. on Monday, the 27th. And I'll walk through what those red lines are. So effectively, it could come back to your planning commission with edits for you to consider and report back to the board. So kind of like we just did
And what was the
with
date
the
of
lot
that
size
again?
variance. What's that?
What was the date of that again?
So the work session is Monday, the 27th from 10 to 12.
Okay.
There will be a public hearing in front of the board on Tuesday, the 28th from 4:30 to 7:30
There we go. Thank you.
At the Delta.
at the Performing Arts.
Performing Arts. Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Found a venue.
Go ahead.
Is there a way that I could get a copy of what was proposed to the Board of County Commissioners, just to help me kind of get up to speed on where things?
Yep. Yes, sir. We can get all that.
Yeah, could you circulate that to all of us?
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Great. Jacob.
Yeah. The agenda was just going out today. That's why I hadn't put it out beyond that, but yeah.
Sorry, were you done?
Yeah, good.
Well, that made it sound like at the work session, they have some other things to put in there other than the amendment that we approved and sent back to them.
That is correct.
Can you tell us what those are?
Confidential. Yes, I can. There's quite a few of them and
Really?
yes.
Yeah.
I will send out the red line, and if you, eventually, I think it's gonna come to you one way or another.
So for clarity, sorry. The law, the statute says that we made a certified copy to them. If they want to make changes, they can send those changes back to us. We have 30 days to respond to those changes, but not create those changes. They're gonna need to create those changes. In my opinion, they need to have public hearings on them as well, but that's up to them. We're not gonna have public hearings on those changes. That is their responsibility. Ours is a 30-day, we'll take them. So what Carl's going through with them, and I don't know what that full list is. We'll have to see what that is. We can accept them or reject them.
But do you think it's coming back to us for essentially the third certification?
It's not really it's, you've certified it. That's the base document. That's being the November 16th certified copy. That's the document. We made some amendments to lot size variance and the recycling for waste management.
We made other comments, but we weren't allowed.
Other comments were made. The planning commission had conversation, home-based businesses, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so there was some interest to have some additional edits made that the board will need to consider. The board could adopt it just as you did, as you certified it on the 16th. They can approve it as it was certified with the amendments that you've reported back on. Or they can say, we want additional edits, at which time then it comes back and the planning commission reports back as TK just mentioned. Or they could just reject the whole thing.
When are they gonna do that, on the 27th?
No, the 28th is the public hearing. That's when they would be able to
Usually when
take
they
an
do a
action.
public hearing, they take testimony.
Right.
Make
And
a
they'll either
decision.
make a decision or they'll ask for time to consider the public input. at
But
that
when you have their interest in further edits right now in a red line,
Correct,
is that what you have?
yes,
And you will send those to us?
Yes.
Right now?
now that the agenda has gone out, yes, I will, it's now public out there.
Anything else, Carl?
Can't wait.
Any other staff reports?
I do have some things I can hand out. I know we postponed going through the priorities and kind of the work program. I have a work program here, but I can hand out, you can look at it, and then we can actually put it on the agenda to have a conversation. It includes a couple things relative to housing. We have a student through Capstone program at UC Denver. And there's a prospectus in here of what that student is working on. There'll be a report in May. And then there's also the request for proposals for a consultant to actually put together a housing strategy. So you can see what would be coming. Those proposals are due March 7th. So I have those to hand out. I can hand them out after the meeting or however, but for you to look at, and then we can have the conversation on a subsequent meeting. Each is a packet.
Want us to take one of each?
One packet, just, yep, they're already separated. Yep, that's it. You take that. That's one whole packet.
Oh, that's one whole packet.
Yeah.
Ever, you been up to anything good?
Okay, sorry. Any other staff reports?
That's it.
One of the things you sent out to me was the address.
That's in there, that is in there too, yes.
Very interesting stuff. I guess it's only for 1 year, but it shows where all the new addresses are.
It includes basically it's the GIS annual report, what happened in 2022, what they've done with addressing, as well as what's happened within the website for people using the GIS information.
But the new addresses are almost equal between unincorporated Delta County and in all the towns, which is really interesting. I would never have thought that would be the case.
past couple of years, we've gotten a lot of address requests. I think it was a lot of older subdivisions that hadn't started development, so that's why we've been seeing a lot of addressing going on the last couple of years.
Anything else, Carl?
That's it.
Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.